Introduction. The term Theosophy is derived from two Greek etymons, theos denoting God, and sophia signifying wisdom, and consequently translates to God wisdom or divine wisdom. Any lexicon will proffer its signification, a pretension to a direct knowledge of God and of spirits, a definition which, while not inaccurate, is meager and affords but a limited conception of the vastitude encompassed by the term, whether historically or practically considered. The acquisition of a direct knowledge of God constitutes, as we shall discern when addressing the religious aspect of Theosophy, the ultimate objective of all Theosophy, precisely as it is the very heart and life of all genuine religion. This represents the supreme knowledge, the cognition of Him by whom all else is known. Nevertheless, the lower knowledge, that of the knowable residuum and the methodologies for apprehending it, figures prominently within theosophical study. This is entirely natural, for the supreme knowledge must be attained by each individual for himself, and little can be effected by another, save by indicating the path, inspiring the exertion, and establishing the example. Conversely, the lower knowledge may be imparted through tomes, lectures, and conversation, being transmissible from mouth to ear. The mysteries. This interior or esoteric dimension of religion is discovered within all the great faiths of the world, declared with varying degrees of explicitness, yet always existing as the heart of the religion, beyond all dogmas which constitute the exoteric aspect. Where the exoteric side propounds a dogma to the intellect, the esoteric proffers a truth to the spirit. The former is perceived and defended by reason, while the latter is apprehended by intuition, that faculty transcending reason for which the philosophy of the West is now groping. In the religions that have vanished, it was disseminated in the mysteries, in the sole manner by which it can be taught, by providing instruction on how to pursue the methods that unfold the life of the spirit more rapidly than that life unfolds through natural and unassisted evolution. We ascertain from classical authors that within the mysteries the dread of death was obliterated, and that the objective was not the fabrication of a virtuous man, for only he who was already virtuous was admissible, but the transmutation of the good man into a god. Such mysteries existed as the core of the religions of antiquity, and only gradually disappeared from Europe between the 4th and 8th centuries, when they ceased for want of pupils. We may discern numerous vestiges of the Christian mysteries in the early Christian writers, particularly in the works of Saint Clement of Alexandria and of Origen, under the appellation of the mysteries of Jesus. The stipulation of high morality was established here, as in the Greek mysteries. Those who for a long time have been conscious of no transgression, let them draw near. Indications of their origin and existence are discovered in the New Testament, wherein the Christ is said to have taught his disciples secretly, "Unto you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of God, but to others in parables." And these teachings, Origen maintains, were transmitted in the mysteries of Jesus. St. Paul also declares that we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, two terms utilized in the mysteries. Islam possesses its secret teachings, reputedly derived from Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, to be discovered through meditation and a discipline of life, methods taught among the Sufis. Buddhism maintains its Sangha, within which, again by meditation and a discipline of life, the inner truth is to be located. Hinduism, in both its scriptures and its current tenets, asserts the existence of the supreme and the lower knowledge. The latter is to be acquired by instruction, while the former is attained, once more, by meditation and a discipline of life. It is this characteristic which renders the supreme knowledge esoteric. It is not deliberately veiled and concealed, but rather it cannot be imparted. It can only be gained by the unfolding of a faculty, of a power to cognize, of a mode of consciousness latent in all men, yet not sufficiently developed in the course of normal evolution. This manifests sporadically in the mystic, often in an erratic fashion and frequently accompanied by hysteria, yet even then it is nonetheless an indication, for the clear-sighted and unprejudiced, of a new departure in the long evolution of human consciousness. It is brought to the surface at times by exceptional purity. The pure in heart shall see God. Startling eruptions of it into ordinary existence are observed in such instances of sudden conversion as are recorded by Professor James. The spiritual consciousness is a reality. Its witness is found in all religions, and it is stirring in many today, just as it has stirred in all ages. Its evolution in the individual can only be gently and deliberately accelerated ahead of normal evolution by the meditation and the discipline of life alluded to above. For esotericism in religion is not a doctrine, but a stage of consciousness. It is not an instruction, but a life. Hence the complaint voiced by many, that it is elusive and indefinite. It appears so to those who have not experienced it, for only that which has been experienced in consciousness can be known to consciousness. Esoteric methods can be taught, but the esoteric knowledge to which they conduce, when successfully followed and lived, must be won by each individual for himself. We may assist in removing obstacles to vision, yet a man can only see with his own eyes. The primary meaning. Theosophy constitutes this direct knowledge of God. The quest for this is the mysticism, or esotericism, common to all religions, cast by Theosophy into a scientific form, as observed in Hinduism, Buddhism, Roman Catholic Christianity, and Sufism. Like these, it teaches in a quite lucid and definite manner the methods of achieving first-hand knowledge by unfolding the spiritual consciousness, and by evolving the organs through which that consciousness can function on our earth. Once more, the methods of meditation and of a discipline of life. Hence, it is identical to the science of the self, the science of the eternal, which forms the core of Hinduism. It is the knowledge of God which is eternal life, representing the essence of Christianity. It is not a novel entity, but resides within all religions, and thus we find the late eminent Orientalist Max Muller composing his renowned work on Theosophy or psychological religion. The secondary meaning. Theosophy, in a secondary sense, the aforementioned being the primary, is the corpus of doctrine obtained by separating the beliefs common to all religions from the peculiarities, specialities, rites, ceremonies, and customs which distinguish one religion from another. It presents these common truths as a consensus of world beliefs, forming, in their entirety, the wisdom religion, or the universal religion, the source from which all separate religions originate, the trunk of the tree of life from which they all branch forth. The appellation Theosophy, which, as we have stated, is Greek, was first employed by Ammonius Saccas in the 3rd century after Christ, and has persisted ever since in the history of religion in the West, denoting not only mysticism but also an eclectic system which accepts truth wherever it is to be found and regards its outer trappings with little concern. It appeared in its present configuration in America and Europe in 1875, at the time when comparative mythology was being utilized as an effective weapon against Christianity. By transforming it into comparative religion, it constructed the researches and discoveries of archaeologists and antiquarians into bulwarks of defense for the adherents of religion, rather than leaving them as missiles of attack for its adversaries. Comparative mythology. The excavation of ancient cities, the opening of sepulchres, and the translation of archaic manuscripts of both defunct and extant religions demonstrated conclusively the fact that all the great religions which exist and have existed resembled each other in their most salient features. Their principal doctrines, the outlines of their morality, the narratives which clustered around their founders, their symbols, and their ceremonies closely resembled one another. The facts were incontrovertible, for they were inscribed upon ancient temples and recorded within archaic texts. Indeed, as research was further pursued, the evidence became increasingly voluminous. Even amongst the most primitive of tribal societies, vestiges were discovered of similar doctrines, traditions of sacred verities obscured by the crudities of animism and fetishism. How might one account for such resemblances? What was their import regarding Christianity? Evolution served then as the open sesame of science, and the response to these interrogations was not long delayed. Religion was deemed a product of evolution, from the obscure ignorance of primal savages, who anthropomorphized the dreaded forces of nature, had evolved the inspiring creeds and splendid philosophies which had enthralled and civilized mankind. The tribal medicine men had been exalted into the founders of religions. The teachings of the saints and prophets were but the sublimation of the hysterical ravings of semi-epileptic visionaries, the synthesis of natural forces, a synthesis wrought by man's magnificent intellect, had been transmuted through emotion into the concept of deity. Such was the response offered by comparative mythology to the alarmed interrogations of men and women who perceived the edifices of their faith disintegrating around them, abandoning them to the glacial gales of doubt. Concurrently, the concept of immortality faced an existential threat, and although intuition whispered, "Not all of me shall die," physiology had usurped the domain of psychology, demonstrating the cerebrum as the progenitor of thought, which was born with the brain, matured with it, suffered disease with it, and decayed with it, did it not ultimately perish with it? Agnosticism burgeoned and flourished. What could man ascertain beyond that which his senses might discover, beyond that which his intellect might comprehend? Such was the condition of educated thought in the final quarter of the 19th century. The current generation can scarcely conceive of that veritable eclipse of faith. Comparative religion. Into this European atmosphere, Theosophy made its sudden advent, asserting the gnosis in opposition to agnosticism and comparative religion against comparative mythology. It proclaimed that humanity had not depleted its faculties in the employment of the senses and the intellect, for transcending these lay the intuition and the infallible witness of the spirit, that the existence of these powers was a demonstrable fact, and that the testimony of the spiritual consciousness was as indubitable as that of the intellectual and the sensuous. It acknowledged every datum unearthed by archaeologists and antiquarians, but maintained that these facts were amenable to an interpretation entirely distinct from that proffered by the adversaries of religion, and that while the facts remained facts, the explication was merely a hypothesis. It posited, in counterpoise to this hypothesis, another which was equally explanatory of the facts, namely that the universality of religious doctrines, ethics, narratives, symbols, and ceremonies, and even the traces thereof amongst savages, originated from the derivation of all religions, from a singular nucleus, from a brotherhood of divine men. This brotherhood, it was asserted, dispatched one of its members into the world periodically to establish a new faith, containing the same essential verities as its predecessors, yet fluctuating in form in accordance with the exigencies of the era and the capacities of the populace to whom the messenger was sent. It was patent that either hypothesis would elucidate the admitted facts. By what means might a determination between them be achieved? Theosophy invoked the testimony of history. It noted that the halcyon days of each religion were its incipient days, and that the teachings of the messenger were never surpassed by subsequent adherents of the faith, whereas the converse must necessarily have obtained had religion been the product of evolution. The Hindus founded themselves upon their Upanishads, the Zoroastrians upon the teachings of the prophet, the Buddhists upon the sayings of the Lord Buddha, the Hebrews upon Moses and the prophets, the Christians upon the Christ, and the Mohammedans upon those of their great prophet. Subsequent religious literature was comprised of commentaries, dissertations, and arguments, rather than novel departures of greater inspiration than the original. Inspiration is invariably sought in later epochs in the sayings of the founder and in the teachings of his immediate disciples. Manu, Vyasa, Zarathustra, the Buddha, the Christ, these figures tower above humanity, commanding the love and reverence of mankind, generation after generation. There are many messengers, the religions are their messages. Theosophy cites all these instances as evidence that its hypothesis is the true explanation of the facts, that it is no longer a mere hypothesis indeed, but a truth affirmed by history. In opposition to this magnificent array of messengers with their messages, comparative mythology cannot adduce a solitary historical proof of a religion that has evolved from savagery into spirituality and philosophy. Its hypothesis is effectively disproved by history. The theosophical perspective is now so prevalently admitted that the public does not realize how triumphant the contradictory theory once stood, when Theosophy again entered the arena of global intellect in 1875, mounted upon its novel charger, the Theosophical Society. However, any who wish to comprehend the conditions then existing should consult the literature of comparative mythology published during the preceding century, from the voluminous works of Dulot and Dupuy through Higgins' Anacalypsis, to the tomes of Hargrave Jennings, Forlong, and a dozen others, speaking with a dogmatism that induced the reader to believe that the statements made were founded upon facts which no educated person could deny. Those who immersed themselves in that labyrinth of discussions in their youth, who lost themselves in its endless and intricate windings, and who beheld their faith consumed by the minotaur of comparative mythology, they know, and only they can fully appreciate, the profundity of the relief when the modern Ariadne, the broadly misunderstood and maligned Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, proffered the clue which guided them through the mazes of the labyrinth, and armed them with the sword of the secret doctrine with which to slay the monster. It is worthy of incidental note that antiquated Christianity, which held that all mankind had descended from Adam, created in 4004 BC, had retained a tradition of a primeval revelation bestowed upon Adam and disseminated by his posterity to all regions of the globe. Man, inheriting original sin from his ancestor, had corrupted this. Yet traces of it were to be discovered in the grains of truth concealed within the husks of heathen religions. This view, however, notwithstanding the germ of truth it contained, was summarily dismissed by the educated, who understood that the human race had existed for hundreds of thousands of years, at the very least, rather than for a mere span of 6,000. Unity of religions. The conclusion of the entire situation is that the fact of the universality of religious belief proves deleterious to any religion which claims for itself a unique and isolated position. In such a stance, it is exposed to assault from all quarters, and its claim is easily refuted. Yet this very fact constitutes a fortification when all religions stand together, when they present themselves as a brotherhood, children of a single progenitor, the divine wisdom. This perspective grows increasingly satisfactory as we observe that each religion possesses its own distinct resonance, making its own specific contribution to the forces laboring for the evolution of man. As we perceive their disparities, in addition to their similarities, we discern a scheme of human pedagogy. Just as when we hear a splendid chord, we sense that a master musician has synthesized the notes with a full knowledge of the value of each. Hinduism proclaims the one immanent life in everything, and hence the solidarity of all existence, the duty of each to each, encapsulated in the untranslatable term dharma. Zoroastrianism strikes the chord of purity, purity of surroundings, of body and of mind. Hebraism resonates with righteousness. Egypt establishes science as its word of power. Buddhism asserts right knowledge. Greece exhales the spirit of beauty. Rome speaks of law. Christianity promulgates the intrinsic value of the individual and exalts the virtue of self-sacrifice. Islam proclaims with resonance the unity of the divine. Indubitably, the globe is enriched by each, and we can ill afford to discard a single gem from our diadem of global faiths. From the exquisite spectacle of their manifold beauty and the spiritual significance of such diversity, there emerges within our consciousness a perception of the reality of the great brotherhood, alongside its function in directing spiritual evolution. Such profound unity, juxtaposed with such exquisite and fecund diversity, cannot be attributed to mere happenstance or fortuitous coincidence. Rather, it must be the consequence of a design deliberately adopted and vigorously executed. Method of study. Inasmuch as the theosophical system of thought constitutes an immense, all-encompassing synthesis of verities, addressing the divine, the cosmos, and humanity, as well as their reciprocal relations, it is optimal to categorize its exposition under 4 distinct headings, corresponding to a patently rational perspective on the human condition. One may regard man as possessing a physical form, an emotional constitution, and an intellect. Through these vehicles, he, an eternal spirit, manifests himself within this temporal realm. These 3 provinces of human nature, as we may designate them, correspond directly to his primary activities: science, ethics combined with aesthetics, and philosophy. Through his sensory faculties, man observes surrounding phenomena and corroborates his observations via experimentation. Through his cerebral capacity, he chronicles and organizes these observations, formulates inductions, constructs hypotheses, validates said hypotheses by devising pivotal experiments, and thereby attains a knowledge of nature and a comprehension of her laws. Thus, he establishes sciences, those resplendent consequences of the intelligent utilization of the physical organs upon the material world. Consequently, we must examine Theosophy strictly as science. Man's emotional nature exhibits sentiments and desires, feelings engendered by external contacts, which elicit either gratification or distress. These interactions awaken within him specific desires, cravings to replicate the pleasurable experience, and to avert the recurrence of suffering. We shall ascertain, when we proceed to address these matters, that the deep-seated yearning for happiness, instilled in every sentient entity, impels him to align himself ultimately in harmony with law, that is, to enact the right and to abjure the wrong. The manifestation of this harmony within existence, in our interpersonal relations and in the architecture of our own character, is right conduct. The manifestation of this identical harmony within matter is right form, or beauty. Therefore, we must investigate Theosophy as morality art. Man's intellect necessitates that his environment, regarding both life and matter, be intelligible. It exacts order, rationality, and logical explication. It cannot dwell amidst chaos without enduring tribulation. It must comprehend and understand if it is to exist in tranquility. Accordingly, we must analyze Theosophy as philosophy. Yet these three, science, morality, art, and philosophy, do not fully satiate our nature. The religious consciousness persistently obtrudes itself across all nations, all climes, and all epochs. It refuses to be silenced, and it will subsist upon the husks of superstition if denied the bread of truth. The spirit that is man will not cease his quest for the universal spirit that is God, and the divine responses, partial, yet bearing the promise of plenitude, constitute religions. Hence, we must study Theosophy as religion. Under these four headings, all theosophical teachings of paramount importance to human life and conduct may be expounded. There remain but a few indications regarding the practical application of these principles to social dilemmas and a mere statement, for within the limited compass of this treatise, no more is feasible. Of the expansive vistas of the past and the future revealed to us by Theosophy, all categorizations that seek to fragment the truly indivisible spirit, that spark from the universal fire, are unsatisfactory and tend to veil from us the unity of the consciousness that constitutes ourself. Senses, emotions, and intellect are but facets of a solitary diamond, aspects of a single spirit. Spiritual life or religion should function as a synthesis of science, morality, art, and philosophy, for these are merely facets of religion itself. Religion should permeate all disciplines, just as spirit permeates all forms. Our self is singular, not multiple, notwithstanding that its superabundant vitality expresses itself in multitudinous ways. Thus, although I partition my subject into distinct sections for the sake of clarity, I entreat my reader to recall that classification is a means and not an end, that classifications are manifold, whereas consciousness is unitary, and that while, for the purpose of lucid explication, we may avoid confusing the persons, we must ever bear in mind the imperative to avoid dividing the substance. Chapter 1. Theosophy as the science of superphysical spheres. The ancient method of inquiry was to enunciate universals and to descend from them to particulars. This remains the optimal approach for the earnest and philosophic student. The contemporary method, conversely, commences with particulars and ascends from them to universals. For the modern reader, who has not yet resolved to undertake a rigorous examination of a subject, this constitutes the more accessible path, for it reserves the most arduous portion for the conclusion. As this treatise is intended for the general reader, I shall adhere to this latter method. Theosophy accepts the method of science, observation, experiment, the arrangement of ascertained facts, induction, hypothesis, deduction, verification, and the assertion of discovered truth, yet it vastly expands the scope thereof. It perceives the totality of existence as comprising but two factors, life and form, or, as some designate them, spirit and matter, and others time and space. For spirit is God's motion, whereas matter is his stillness, both find their union within him. Since the root of spirit is his life, and the root of matter is the universal ether, these represent the two aspects of the one eternal transcending space and time. While conventional science restricts matter to the tangible, Theosophical science extends it through manifold gradations, intangible to the physical, yet tangible to superphysical senses. It has been ascertained that the prerequisite for comprehending the physical universe is the possession of a physical body. Certain components of this body have evolved into organs of sense, eyes, ears, etc., through which the perception of external objects is rendered possible. Other components have evolved into organs of action, hands, feet, and the remainder through which contact with external objects may be achieved. It discerns that historically, physical evolution has been effected by the efforts of life to employ its nascent powers, and that the endeavor to exercise an inherent faculty has gradually molded matter into an organ through which that faculty may be more completely utilized. To invert Buchner's assertion, we do not walk because we possess legs. Rather, we possess legs because we desired to move. One may trace the evolution of legs from the transient pseudopodia of the amoeba through the development of permanent protrusions from bodies. Culminating in the legs of man, all were gradually formed by the efforts of the living creature to achieve locomotion. As William Kingdon Clifford observed regarding the colossal saurians of a past epoch, some desired to fly, and they subsequently became birds. The will to live, that is, to desire, to think, to act, constitutes the impetus behind all evolution. The Theosophist extends this identical principle into higher realms, positing that if such exist, and if consciousness is to cognize any sphere other than the physical, it must possess a body composed of matter pertaining to the sphere it seeks to investigate. Moreover, this body must possess senses, developed by the same imperative of life to see, to hear, and so forth. That there should exist other spheres, and other bodies through which those spheres may be cognized, is no more intrinsically implausible than the existence of a physical sphere and the physical bodies through which we perceive it. The occultist, the student of the operations of the divine mind in nature, asserts that such spheres exist, and that he possesses and employs such bodies. The following statements, with one exception which shall be noted in its proper place, are proffered as the results of investigations conducted in such spheres through the use of such bodies by the writer and other occultists. We all received the general outline from highly evolved members of our humanity. Subsequently, we have verified its veracity stage by stage, and have bridged numerous lacunae through our own researches. We therefore maintain that we possess the right to affirm, based upon our own first-hand experience extending over a period of 23 years in one instance and 25 in another, that superphysical research is feasible. We assert that it is as reliable as physical research and should be conducted in similar manners. Furthermore, we acknowledge that investigators are subject to errors in both physical and superphysical spheres for analogous reasons, and that these errors should prompt more rigorous inquiry rather than the cessation thereof. A table of correspondences. The following table delineates the spheres related to and including our Earth, the bodies utilized in investigating them, and the states of consciousness manifested through them by their possessor, the man. The eternal man, a fragment of the life of God, is designated the monad, a unity. He is veritably a son of God, created in his image, and expressing his life in three modes, by the aspect of will, the aspect of wisdom, and the aspect of creative activity. He resides in his own sphere, a spark within the divine fire, and projects a ray, a current of his life, which embodies itself within the 5 spheres of manifestation. This ray, appropriating an atom of matter from each of the 3 higher of these spheres, manifests as the human spirit, replicating the 3 aspects of the monad: will, wisdom, and creative activity. At a specific stage of evolution, he reveals himself as the human ego, the individualized self. He commences his extensive journey as a mere seed of life, and, never forfeiting his identity, traverses that long pilgrimage, unfolding all the powers of the monad that lie latent within him, like the tree within the seed. As he masters his kingdom of matter, his parent monad infuses into him increasing measures of life, and derives from him increasing knowledge of the worlds in which he resides. However, entry into the 3 highest manifested spheres does not suffice for the acquisition of full knowledge and full power within our solar system. 2 spheres yet remain, and the process of immersion into matter continues. The spirit fortifies himself for his labor by appropriating a molecule of the coarser matter from the lowest sphere he has hitherto entered. He attaches to this an atom from the 4th manifested sphere of denser matter, and one from the 5th, the lowest, our physical sphere. He is to acquire bodies, formed around these permanently appropriated particles of matter, through which he may be capable of cognizing and acting upon the 5 manifested spheres. It shall be demonstrated that his lower bodies, constituting what is termed his personality, are discarded at and subsequent to what we designate as death, and are renewed for each successive birth. Conversely, the higher bodies, constituting his individuality, endure throughout this extensive pilgrimage, a significant fact pertinent to the possibility of recalling the past. The aforementioned facts are tabulated hereafter. An immortal individuality, a mortal personality, the trinities of religions, the 3 persons of Christianity. As manifested within a solar system, they appear as a triad by virtue of functional difference when perceived from below. The entire solar system may be termed the body of the Logos, and the sun his physical body, yet they encapsulate but a fragment of him. Man, created in the image of God. His aspects, will, wisdom, and activity, or power, knowledge, love, and creativeness, are demonstrated in the embodied reproduction of himself as will, intuition, and intellect. The 7 are designated from below upwards: solid, liquid, gaseous, etheric, superetheric, subatomic, atomic. It may be asked, what is the objective of this descent into matter? What does the monad derive from it? Omniscient in his own sphere, he is blinded by matter in the spheres of manifestation, being incapable of responding to their vibrations. Just as a man who cannot swim, when cast into deep water, drowns, yet may learn to navigate freely within it, so it is with the monad. At the conclusion of his pilgrimage, he shall be free of the solar system, empowered to function in any region thereof, to create at will, and to traverse at pleasure. Every power that he unfolds through denser matter, he retains in perpetuity under all conditions. The implicit has become explicit, the potential the actual. It is his own will to live in all spheres, and not merely in one, that impels him into manifestation. The physical body, the actual unfolding of consciousness, is best traced from below, inasmuch as the physical body is the entity first organized as its instrument for knowledge, and it is through this medium that consciousness reveals itself within the physical world we know. The emotional nature stimulates the glands and ganglia of the corporeal frame, while the mental faculty enthrones itself over the cerebrospinal system. Concurrently, these aspects proceed with their evolution in the invisible spheres via the stimulus derived from the physical plane. We need not dwell upon the evolution of the dense physical body, as such matters fall within the purview of physical science. Here, human consciousness operates automatically. The man no longer requires the necessity of directing physical processes, for they proceed by habit, the consequence of prolonged pressure exerted by consciousness. The subtler portion of the physical anatomy, the etheric double, permeates the dense matter and extends marginally beyond it across the entire surface. Its distinct sense organs manifest as vortices upon its own periphery, situated opposite the crown of the head, the point between the eyebrows, the throat, the heart, the spleen, the solar plexus, and the base of the spine. Regarding the vortex located in the lower region of the pelvic basin, this is unutilized, save in the practice of black magic. These vortices, technically designated as chakrams, signifying wheels, derived from their visual characteristic, are aroused into activity during the course of occult discipline, and they establish a bridge between the physical and astral spheres, thereby enabling the latter to be integrated within the activity of the waking consciousness. The health of the dense counterpart relies upon the vitality resident within the etheric double, which draws its energy directly from the sun and, at the point of contact with the spleen, fractionates this energy into streams which it conveys to the various organs of the dense body. The surplusage radiates outward, energizing all living creatures within its vicinity. The immediate proximity of a vigorously healthy individual imparts vitality, whereas a constitutionally frail body draws upon the vitality of its surroundings, frequently causing serious depletion to those in close attendance. Physical magnetism, the curative power, etc., represent methods by which this surplus vitality may be beneficially expended. Etheric vision, a physical sight of greater acuity than the norm, may be utilized for the examination of minute objects, such as chemical atoms, or for the study of those nature spirits which employ etheric matter for their lowest vehicles, fairies, gnomes, brownies, and creatures of that ilk. A marginally increased tenseness of the nerves, induced by excitement, ill health, or alcohol, may render these entities visible. The etheric portion of the brain assumes an active role in dreams, particularly those precipitated by external impressions or by internal pressure originating from the cerebral vessels. Such dreams are customarily dramatic in nature and may embellish any recollection of past events, objects, or persons. In normal, healthy individuals, the etheric aspect of the physical body does not separate from the dense form, however. The greater portion of it may be expelled by anesthetics, and it disengages with facility in the case of persons possessing mediumistic traits, frequently serving as the foundation for materializations. Death constitutes the complete withdrawal from the dense counterpart. In conjunction with the consciousness residing in the higher bodies, it remains associated with these for a varying interval, typically approximating 36 hours post-mortem, whereupon it is cast off by the man as being of no further utility. It subsequently decays pari passu with the dense corpse. The emotional or astral sphere, its worlds, and its inhabitants. The astral sphere associated with our Earth comprises two globes with which we need not presently concern ourselves, in addition to the astral world with its inhabitants, and the intermediate or desire world, a division of the astral, the denizens of which exist normally under specific conditions. The entire sphere pertains to that state of consciousness, manifesting as feelings, desires, and emotions. These fluctuations in consciousness are accompanied by vibrations within astral matter. And, as astral matter is tenuous and exceedingly rapid in its vibratory motions, these vibrations become visible to astral vision as colors. The passion of anger precipitates vibrations that yield a flash of scarlet, whereas a sensation of devotion or love suffuses the astral body with a blue or rosy hue. Each emotion possesses its appropriate color, for the reason that each is accompanied by its own invariable set of vibrations. The human astral body is, naturally, composed of astral matter when accompanying the physical body, which it permeates and beyond which it extends. It manifests as a nebulous cloud or as a defined oval, contingent upon whether its possessor is minimally or significantly developed. Clarity and brilliance of the more delicate colors, augmented definiteness of form, and an increase in magnitude characterize the higher evolution. When the man in his higher bodies withdraws from the physical, as occurs nightly in sleep, the astral body assumes the likeness of the physical form. Astral matter being exceedingly plastic under the influence of thought, a man appears in the astral world in the likeness of himself as he perceives himself, clad in the vestments of which he thinks. A soldier slain in battle, appearing in his astral body to a distant friend, will bear his wounds. A drowned man will appear in dripping garments. While human beings in the astral world normally assume human forms, the inhabitants of that realm, who have never possessed physical bodies, such as higher fairies, nature spirits connected with the evolution of plant and animal life, and the like, utilize bodies that are constantly altering their outlines and dimensions. Sportive elementals, as nature spirits are often designated, will occasionally exploit this plasticity of astral matter to expand themselves into monstrous and terrible shapes for the purpose of terrifying untrained intruders into their domain. Certain narcotics, such as hashish, bhang, and opium, as well as extreme alcoholic poisoning, so affect the physical nerves as to render them susceptible to astral vibrations. Subsequently, the patients catch a glimpse of certain inhabitants of the astral world. The horrors which torment a man suffering from delirium tremens are largely attributable to the sight of the loathsome elementals that congregate around places where liquor is vended, feeding upon its exhalations, and which are attracted to him by the effluvia of his own drink-sodden body. All sensations of pleasure and pain within the physical body are due to the presence of the interpenetrating astral vehicle. Should this be expelled by anesthetics or mesmerism, sensation vanishes from the physical form. In sleep, during which the etheric double does not depart from its dense counterpart, the astral may be summoned back with great celerity by any disturbance of the physical body, however, where a significant portion of the etheric matter has also been expelled. The bridge of communication is severed, and a trance state is produced. Under these conditions, the dense body may be seriously mutilated without pain supervening. Pain will, however, manifest as soon as the astral body slips once again into the physical vessel and consciousness returns. It may be posited, in passing, that the normal center of human consciousness at the present stage of evolution resides within the astral body, from which it operates upon the physical. Physical consciousness is now subconscious, if such a bull may be permitted to an Irishwoman. The condition of a person during sleep varies in accordance with his stage of evolution. The undeveloped man, upon leaving the physical body in his higher vehicles, hovers around the locales with which he is familiar. The average man drifts towards persons to whom he is attracted, yet his attention is directed inwards, and he communes with his friends mentally only. At a slightly more advanced stage, his mind becomes exceedingly active and receptive, capable of resolving problems presented to it with greater facility than within the physical body, as evidenced by the common adages, sleep brings counsel, better sleep on it, and the like. A problem quietly deposited in the mind upon retiring to sleep will generally be found resolved in the morning. Yet, all these individuals do not operate consciously within the astral world. For this to occur, it is requisite that the attention be directed outwards rather than inwards. Where an individual is pure and self-controlled, exhibiting benevolence within the physical sphere, he is frequently awakened in the astral world by a more advanced being. The procedure entails merely inducing him to direct his attention to his environs, rather than abiding immersed in contemplation. His astral vehicle has evolved and attained organization through his mental and moral endeavors, requiring him merely to awaken to his astral surroundings. His guide elucidates the circumstances and, for a duration, retains him in close proximity. He demonstrates that astral matter yields to his thought, that he may traverse at will and with whatever velocity he desires, that he may pass through stone, submerge into oceans, transit through conflagrations, step beyond a precipice and hover in the ether, provided always that he remains intrepid and assured. Should he forfeit his courage, and only then is he imperiled, and the imagined injury may repercuss, manifesting upon the physical body as a contusion, an abrasion, or a lesion. Upon mastering these preliminary instructions, and acquiring the capacity to perceive and hear accurately within the astral plane, he is assigned the task of aiding the living and the deceased. He then becomes what is termed an invisible helper, dedicating his nights to succoring the distressed, instructing the unenlightened, and guiding those who have newly entered the astral world through the portal of death. To these latter individuals we must now direct our attention. The desire world, or purgatory. This constitutes that section of the astral realm wherein conditions are specialized for discarnate human beings, who, lacking knowledge, find themselves not free within the astral world, but are rather the spirits in prison alluded to by St. Peter. They are held captive by their own desires, and consequently the appellation of the desire world is bestowed upon their abode. We have observed that, at the moment of death, the man, arrayed in his subtler bodies, extricates himself from the physical vestment worn during terrestrial life, the coat of skin with which the primal man was clad following his fall into matter, precipitated by his seizure of knowledge. These matters constitute an allegory, as St. Paul remarks regarding the narrative of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar. Having discarded his coat of skin, the man remains himself, precisely as he was whilst clothed within it, and he proceeds to his rightful station in the astral world, the locus for which he has prepared himself. A rearrangement of the matter of his astral body occurs automatically, unless he possesses sufficient knowledge to forestall it. During the existence of the physical body, the astral particles originating from all 7 astral subdivisions of matter circulate freely among themselves, and representatives of every variety are invariably present upon the surface of the astral body. Vision of the entire astral world depends upon the presence, on the surface of the astral body, of particles derived from all 7 subdivisions, which correspond to our solids, liquids, gases, and the 4 states of ether. These particles are not aggregated and fashioned into a specific organ of vision, akin to the physical eye. Rather, when the man directs his attention outwards, he perceives through his entire being, through all these particles, or through such of them as lie in the direction of the object toward which his attention is oriented. If the rearrangement of the astral matter occurs, the substance of each subdivision segregates, and a series of concentric shells is formed, with the densest residing upon the exterior. Consequently, the man can perceive only that subdivision of the astral world to which the outermost shell pertains. The quantity of each variety of matter relies upon the nature of the desires and emotions he has cultivated whilst on earth. Should these have been of a base order, the densest astral matter will be intensely vitalized, and this outermost shell, placing him in contact solely with the lowest subdivision of the astral world, will endure for a protracted period. It disintegrates through gradual starvation, by the deprivation of its accustomed gratifications. Thus, a drunkard, a glutton, a sensualist, or a man of violent and brutal passions, having strongly vitalized the densest and coarsest combinations of astral matter through physical indulgence, can be conscious of his surroundings only through these mediums. He perceives only individuals akin to himself, and the vilest qualities of those who are of a superior type. His raging passions can find no satiation, for he has forfeited the physical organs by which he erstwhile gratified them. Moreover, these passions are far more violent than previously, for during his physical existence, the majority of the force of the astral vibrations was expended merely in setting in motion the heavy physical particles of matter, and only the residue was experienced as pleasure or pain. Hence, all passions on earth are pale and feeble compared with their violence in the astral world, where, after effortlessly setting in motion the light astral particles, they manifest the entire remainder of their force as pleasure or pain, as a rapture or an agony inconceivable upon the terrestrial plane. This latter state is what religions term hell, and a veritable hell it is regarding suffering, created by the man for his own habitation. Yet it is merely temporary, and might therefore, for Orthodox Christians and Muslims, be more fitly designated as purgatory. The thick stratum of densest matter eventually erodes, and the man loses sight of this sphere of astral life, and commences to perceive the subsequent one, having learned, through the melancholy lesson of bitter suffering, that the pleasures he valued on earth are verily wombs of pain. The average individual does not experience this unfortunate post-mortem condition, as he has not drawn much of the densest matter into his astral body whilst on earth, and such matter as he possesses is not strongly vitalized, and thus cannot detain him. if his interests on earth have all been trivial, a cycle of office or domestic drudgery or manual labor, alternating with low, though not vicious, forms of amusement, and if he has cared nothing for broader interests, those of the community and the nation, he will find himself encased by matter of the sixth subdivision of the astral world. He will subsequently be surrounded by the astral counterparts of physical objects, lacking the power to affect them or to participate in the earth life conducted among them. He will, therefore, to employ a colloquialism, find himself exceedingly bored and become prey to an intolerable sense of ennui. It may be posited that this is severe, as most individuals are compelled to spend their lives in drudgery of some nature. Are they to suffer boredom after death, having drudged previously? This is true, yet a modicum of knowledge will obviate this, and for this precise reason, Theosophy is being disseminated far and wide. The labor which sustains the world need not be drudgery, and to deeply religious persons it is not drudgery even now, for all useful work constitutes part of the divine activity, and all workers are organs of that activity, the hands wherewith the divine worker accomplishes his work. Production and distribution, agriculture, mining, manufacturing, commerce, and even the pettiest trade are God's methods of nourishing humanity and constitute the means of evolution. When a man or a woman perceives their minor daily tasks as integral portions of the one great work, they are no longer drudges, but co-workers with God. As George Herbert sang, "A servant in this cause makes drudgery divine, who sweeps a room as for thy laws makes that and faction fine. Those who labor thus will encounter no boredom after death, but rather fresh and joyous activity. As for the remainder, they gradually adapt themselves to the new conditions, and are assisted in doing so. They discover that they are relieved of many of the discomforts of earth, and may lead a quite pleasant existence. They remain in contact with their friends on earth, and discover that these are quite companionable during earth's nights, though provokingly indifferent during its days, as Mr. Leadbeater pithily observes. The dead are never for a moment under the impression that they have lost the living, however much the latter may lament the loss of the deceased whom they loved. The individual proceeds through the sixth, fifth, and fourth subdivisions, deriving increasing communion with those he holds dear, until he ascends into the higher stratums, the material heavens conceived by the less enlightened adherents of all faiths. This is the region dedicated to art, literature, science, philanthropy, and the broader pursuits of existence. Activities previously followed in the terrestrial sphere with a degree of self-interest are here continued along habitual lines, utilizing astral reproductions of physical instrumentalities. These very endeavors, when executed with altruistic motives, elevate the man into the heaven world, their rightful abode. Thither also pass those who engaged in them with more self-serving intent, for when they eventually grow satiated with such activities in the astral realm, they sink into slumber, only to awaken in heaven. The astral body is discarded, shell by shell, and in due course resolves into its constituent elements, akin to the physical vessel. Certain pure and lofty souls traverse the astral sphere without paying it heed, their consciousness fixed firmly upon superior realities. Others, remaining fully conscious, do not permit the matter of their astral vehicles to be reconfigured. Instead, they retain their liberty and perform beneficial service. Excluding this latter class, whose sojourn in the astral realm depends upon other factors, the prevailing principle dictates that the astral post-mortem existence is prolonged for the less evolved and brief for the well-developed, whereas the heavenly existence is extensive for the latter and transient for the former. The mental sphere, its worlds and inhabitants. The mental sphere associated with our earth comprises two globes, with which we are not presently concerned. It further contains two worlds, the higher and the lower, each populated by its own inhabitants. A portion of the lower is situated under specific conditions for the utilization of discarnate human beings, constituting the heaven world. The entire sphere pertains to the state of consciousness denominated as thought, or mental activity, and its matter responds to the fluctuations in consciousness engendered by intellection. Its 7 subdivisions, although significantly more subtle, correspond once again to those of the physical and astral worlds. Furthermore, the mental world is, like the physical, bifurcated into a lower and an upper section. The former consists of the 4 denser subdivisions, while the latter comprises the 3 subtler ones. 2 bodies appertain to this realm, the mental body, composed of combinations of the denser matter, and the causal body, composed of the finer. This world is of singular significance, not merely because man resides here for the majority of his existence once the mind is sufficiently developed, descending into the physical world only for fleeting intervals of mortal life, much as a bird dives into the sea to capture a fish, but because it serves as the confluence of the higher and lower consciousnesses. The immortal individuality, descending from on high after the monad has formed the spirit by emanating his ray, waits in the exalted heavens while the lower bodies are constructed around atoms attached to him. He broods over them through long eons of gradual evolution. When they are sufficiently advanced, he descends to take possession of them, utilizing them for his own evolutionary progression. The domain of the spirit as intellect, of him whose essential nature is knowledge, is the causal world, comprising the three superior levels of the mental sphere. These levels provide him with his vehicle, the causal body, which remains and perpetually evolves throughout his extended series of incarnations in denser matter. This world and body are designated thus because all the causes, the effects of which are manifested in the lower worlds, reside within them. The causal body originates, concurrent with the aforementioned descent, as a tenuous film of matter, ovoid in shape, encompassing the lower bodies which are formed within it, much like a chick within an egg. A delicate network radiates from the permanent atom of the causal body to all extremities of this ovoid film, the atom itself, glowing like a brilliant nucleus. Associated with it are the permanent atoms of the physical and astral bodies, as well as the permanent molecular unit of the mental. During incarnation, it encloses the bodies in their entirety, and at the dissolution of each, it preserves the permanent germ of said vehicle, with all the vibratory powers enshrined therein, the seed of life for each successive form. For ages, it remains scarcely more than this subtle network and surface, for it can develop only through higher human activities, those capable of eliciting a faint vibratory response within its subtle matter. As the personality becomes more thoughtful, more altruistic, and more engaged in righteous endeavors, its harvest for its possessor becomes progressively more abundant. The personalities are akin to leaves generated by a tree. They absorb material from the exterior, transform it into beneficial substances, and transmit it down the tree as crude sap before they detach and wither. The sap is subsequently converted into nutriment, sustaining the tree, which then produces new foliage to repeat the cycle. The consciousness gathers experience within the mental, astral, and physical bodies. Discarding the physical and astral shells like dead leaves, it transmutes these experiences into qualities within the mental body. During its heavenly existence, it is absorbed into the causal body along with its harvest, discarding the mental body like the others, and is blended with the spirit who projected it, thereby enriching him with its yield. It has served the spirit as a hand, extended to grasp sustenance. The enriched spirit, the man, constructs around the ancient permanent atoms a new mental and astral body capable of manifesting his augmented attributes. The physical permanent atom is implanted through the father into the body of the mother, who is destined to provide the physical vehicle required by the immutable law of cause and effect. These three lower bodies are nourished and tinctured by her corresponding vehicles, and the new personality is thus introduced into the mortal sphere. While the intellect possesses the causal body as its vehicle, its counterpart in denser matter, the mind, employs the mental body as its instrument. The activity of the former is abstract ideation, while that of the latter is concrete cognition. The mind acquires knowledge by utilizing the senses for observation, gathering percepts, and by processing these to synthesize them into concepts. Its faculties include attention, memory, reasoning by induction and deduction, imagination, inter alia. The intellect acquires knowledge through the assonance of the external world with its own nature, and its power is creation, the arrangement of matter into forms for its own inherent progeny ideas. When it projects a flash into the lower mind, illuminating its concepts and inspiring its imagination, we designate this illumination as genius. Both the causal and mental bodies expand immensely in the advanced stages of evolution, manifesting a resplendent radiance of multi-hued lights. They glow with intense splendor when comparatively quiescent, and emit the most dazzling coruscations when in a state of high activity. Both interpenetrate the lower bodies and extend beyond their periphery, as has previously been elucidated regarding the etheric double and the astral body. Those portions of these finer vehicles which are exterior to the dense physical form collectively constitute the aura of the human being, the luminous, chromatic cloud enveloping his dense corpus. The etheric portion of the aura may be perceived via Dr. Kilner's apparatus. An ordinary clairvoyant typically discerns this alongside the astral portion, while a more highly developed clairvoyant perceives the etheric, astral, and mental portions. Few possess the capacity to behold the portion consisting of the causal body, and fewer still the exquisite beauty of the intuitional, or the dazzling luminosity of the spiritual vehicles. The clarity, delicacy, and brilliance of the auric colors, or conversely their opacity, coarseness, and dullness, indicate the general stage of advancement attained by the subject. Fluctuations of emotion suffuse the astral portion with ephemeral hues, such as the rose of love, the blue of devotion, the gray of fear, the brown of brutality, and the sickly green of jealousy. The pure yellow of intelligence, the orange of pride, and the brilliant green of mental sympathy and alertness are likewise recognizable. Striations, bands, streaks, flashes, and distinct coruscations present a multiplicity of forms for analysis, each expressive of specific qualities inherent in the mental and moral character. The aura of the child, furthermore, exhibits a marked disparity from that of the adult. However, we must proceed, as we are constrained by the limitations of space. The mind, operating within the mental body, engenders results, specifically thoughts. Within the astral and physical bodies, in the latter, it utilizes the cerebrospinal system as its instrument. In its own realm, it emits definite thought forms. Thoughts incarnated in mental matter, which go forth into the mental world, and may assimilate themselves into other mental bodies. Simultaneously, its own vibrations transmit undulations in all directions, inducing sympathetic vibrations in others. A comparatively sparse number of individuals at the present stage of evolution possess the capacity to function unimpeded in the mental world, clothed solely in the higher and mental bodies, separated from the physical and astral vehicles. Yet, those who can achieve this may articulate its phenomena, a subject of significant import, inasmuch as heaven constitutes a portion of the mental world, protected from all discordant encroachments. The inhabitants of this sphere are the higher ranks of the nature spirits, referred to in the East as devas, or shining ones, and by Christians, Hebrews, and Muslims as angels, the lowest order of angelic intelligences. They are radiant entities displaying shifting shades of exquisite hues, whose language is color, and whose motion is melody. The heaven world. The heavenly portion of the mental world is replete with discarnate human beings who are transmuting the benevolent experiences garnered during their earthly lives into mental and moral powers. Here, the religious devotee is perceived, absorbed in reverent contemplation of the divine form he adored on earth, for the deity reveals himself in whatever guise is most cherished by the human heart. Here, the musician saturates the atmosphere with melodious sounds, cultivating his capacity into a higher potency. Here, all who love remain in intimate communion with their beloved, and affection acquires new strength and profundity through the fullest expression. Here, the artists of form and color execute splendid conceptions in malleable substance, which is responsive to their thought. Here, philanthropists devise grand schemes for human benevolence, and architects draft plans to be actualized upon their return to earth. Every noble endeavor pursued on earth, every exalted thought and aspiration, here matures into flowers, blossoms that contain within themselves the seeds to be subsequently sown on earth. Cognizant of this, men may, in this world, prepare the seeds of experience that shall blossom in heaven. The cultivation of every literary and artistic faculty, of patient and steadfast love, of unselfish service to mankind, and of devotion to God, renders heaven complete, opulent, and fruitful. Those who sow sparingly shall reap sparingly, whereas everyone's cup of happiness shall be filled to overflowing. It is we who fashion the magnitude of our cups here. The duration of our celestial existence depends upon the materials we can transport through the gateway of death, and these materials consist of virtuous thoughts and pure emotions. It may extend to 1,500 or 2,000 years, it may endure but a few centuries, and in the very strictly developed, even less. When the entirety of the experience has been assimilated into faculty, the man discards his mental body and becomes truly himself, residing in the causal and the two higher bodies. If highly developed, he may dwell for a time in the higher levels of the mental worlds. Generally, however, his sojourn there is brief, sufficient only to allow him to survey his entire past and to glance over his impending life, whereupon he quickly initiates his descent, driven by a thirst for further experience. The germs of the developed mental faculties are implanted in mental matter to shape a new mental body. Those of the developed emotional and moral faculties are planted in astral matter to form a new astral body. These constitute the innate faculties, the character, which the child brings with him into the world. The higher spheres. The two higher spheres, the intuitional, wherein the Christ nature unfolds in man, and the spiritual, cannot be fully delineated here. The intuition, that lucid insight into the nature of things which perceives the one self in all and annihilates the sense of separation, is the faculty of the wisdom nature, the supreme spiritual vision for which nature possesses no veil across all her kingdoms. The spiritual sphere, in which the unity of the human will with the divine is realized, is the ultimate and highest in the currently manifested system, as the monadic and divine spheres remain, as yet, unmanifested. The wheel of normal human evolution revolves within the three worlds, the physical, the intermediate, and the heavenly. In the first, we gather experience. In the second, we suffer and enjoy according to our life in the first. In the third, we enjoy unalloyed happiness and transmute experience into faculty and past suffering into power. These we bring back, and thus we grow and evolve, eon upon eon. Each stage of this Aeonian evolution may be investigated by accelerating the unfolding of the consciousness and the development of the bodies pertaining to the different worlds. No statement made in this section need be accepted on faith. Save that regarding the monad, however, the study which enables full verification is as exacting as that of the highest mathematics or astronomy. A marginal advancement beyond the normal will, however, enable etheric and astral facts to be examined, and such experience may encourage the student to undertake the subsequent labors. Religious ceremonies and rites. A significant service rendered by Theosophy as science to the various religions is the explanation it offers regarding their respective ceremonies and rites. These were originally devised by great occultists to transmit the influences of the higher spheres to the devoted and the virtuous. A sacrament is precisely defined in the Catechism of the Church of England as the outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual grace. Moreover, it is not merely a sign that the grace is present, but an instrument through which it may be conveyed to the worshipper. According to the ancient rules, a sacrament requires an outer physical object, a sign of power, and a word of power. Furthermore, there must be an officiant properly qualified in accordance with religious law. Thus, in Christian baptism, water constitutes the physical object, the sign of power is the cross, and the word of power is the baptismal formula. I baptize thee in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, with the officiant being the duly ordained minister. The inward spiritual grace is the benediction poured out upon the child by the surrounding angels, his admission to the fellowship of Christians in this and other worlds, and the welcome extended to him by the invisible and visible Christian Church. In the Holy Communion, the same principle is observed, and any clairvoyant observing the ceremony will perceive an effulgence of light ensuing from the words of consecration, the light flashing through the church and bathing the worshipper, to be appropriated and assimilated by the truly devoted. It is by virtue of the tradition regarding this real presence that the host is reserved within Roman Catholic churches, from which, in point of fact, a constant benediction radiates. Ceremonies performed to assist those who have departed, the so-called dead, are all founded upon a knowledge of the facts of the intermediate world, although the persons participating in them today understand very little of their actual significance regarding the one for whom they are performed. The daily prayer and meditation, obligatory for every pious Hindu, are intended to draw down and disseminate gracious spiritual influences, attracting the devas and the ministry of angels to shed their blessings upon the neighborhood and upon its human, animal, and vegetative lives. All these matters are regarded as superstitions by the ordinary modern man of the world. Yet, since the visible world is interpenetrated and surrounded by the invisible, it is not irrational to posit that the influence of the latter should exert itself upon the former. Toward the conclusion of the 18th century, it was deemed a superstition to credit the existence of a force capable of actuating the limbs of frogs suspended upon a wire. Indeed, Galvani was subjected to significant derision for observing their gyrations as they awaited the skillet, and was styled the frog's dancing master. Notwithstanding such skepticism, the galvanic current has subsequently bridged the continents. Many a superstition indicates the path toward the discovery of forces unknown to the ordinary man. The sagacious will observe and investigate, and will engage in study before they reject. Chapter 2. The Ethics of Harmony in Aesthetic Evolution. Morality has been aptly defined as the science of harmonious relations existing among all living entities. Moral laws constitute laws of nature just as substantially as any statutes governing physical phenomena. They are to be investigated via the same arduous processes and validated by identical methods. Just as physical hygiene was prescribed by ancient legislators as a component of religion, so too did they prescribe moral hygiene. Both have been accepted as elements of revelation by their adherents, however. Both are predicated upon facts of nature known to these highly evolved individuals, albeit unknown to their populace. The life side, morality. We have observed that the doctrine of one omnipresent life forms an integral part of Theosophy. Upon this foundation, morality is established. To cause injury to another is to inflict injury upon oneself, for each entity constitutes a portion of a single whole. The body as a totality is intoxicated if poison is introduced into any specific segment of it, and all living things are detrimentally affected by harm inflicted upon one. This singular life manifests itself in all things by pursuing happiness, everywhere and perpetually, without exception. Life seeks felicity, and no suffering is ever voluntarily endured save as a pathway to a more profound and enduring joy. None seeks purposeless suffering for the mere sake of tribulation. It is tolerated solely as a means to an objective. All religions recognize God as infinite bliss, and union with God, with perfect bliss, is the aspiration of them all. Since man's nature is divine, it is also fundamentally blissful. Consequently, he accepts all happiness as natural. Its arrival is perceived as requiring no justification, for he never inquires, "Why do I enjoy?" Conversely, his nature rebels against pain as unnatural and as necessitating justification, and he instinctively demands, "Why do I suffer?" Profound, unalloyed, and enduring bliss is the ultimate objective of life, representing the perfect satisfaction of every aspect of one's being. The ephemeral will-o'-the-wisp of earthly pleasure is frequently mistaken for the radiance of the sun of bliss. Thereupon, man suffers and learns. For God possesses a plan, and that plan is evolution. If the constituent part opposes the whole, it must inevitably suffer. Indeed, all human suffering is attributable to men's ignorance regarding their own nature, and to a disregard, also stemming from ignorance, of the laws of nature amidst which they reside. Right and wrong. If evolution constitutes God's plan, we may then acquire a definitive criterion for right and wrong. The scientist will assert, that which advances evolution is right, that which impedes it is wrong. The religionist will declare, that which accords with the divine will is right, that which opposes it is wrong. Both articulate precisely the same concept, for the divine will is evolution. By examining evolution, we ascertain that its initial half has been developing an ever-increasing separation. The objective having been the production of the individual, we observe that now, commencing the second half, we are progressing toward the integration of individuals into a unity. The Hindus designate these processes the path of forthgoing and the path of return, and there exist no appellations more expressive. Man's profoundest instincts, manifesting in the foremost of his race, and instinct is the voice of life, are now seeking brotherhood, beyond which lies unity, the construction of many parts into a perfect whole. Hence, all that contributes to unity is right, all that militates against it is wrong. Emotions and virtues. The subsequent step recognizes that happiness is essentially a sensation. It derives from a perception of the augmentation of life within us. We experience happiness when our life expands. When it becomes greater, we suffer when our life diminishes, when it becomes lesser. Love engenders union and thus abundance. Hate precipitates separation and hence diminution. We distinguish here the two root emotions, love and hate, both expressions of desire, the manifestation of that aspect of will observed throughout the worlds as attraction and repulsion, the builder and the destroyer of universes, systems, and worlds, as well as of states, families, and individuals. Out of these two root emotions spring all virtues and vices. Every virtue is an expression of love, universalized and established by right reason as a permanent mode of consciousness. Every vice is an expression of hate, universalized and established by erroneous reason as a permanent mode of consciousness, right and wrong having already been defined. This concept will be immediately comprehended through an illustration drawn from the family. We may premise that each of us, in society as in the domestic sphere, is encompassed by three, and only three, classes: his superiors, his equals, and his inferiors, with each of whom he maintains relations. In a harmonious family, love unites all members. Love, directing its gaze upward to the heads of the household, manifests as the emotion of reverence. Love, looking around the circle of brothers and sisters, manifests as the emotion of affection. Love, looking downward upon the group of dependents, manifests as the emotion of beneficence. These emotions emerge spontaneously in the virtuous family, the family wherein right sentiment governs and love constitutes the fulfillment of the law. Where love reigns, statutes are superfluous. Beyond the family, when men enter into relations with the general public, the attitude assumed spontaneously within the domestic sphere by love must be reproduced externally with deliberation, through virtue. Looking upward, as to God, the king, or the aged, the emotion of love, as reverence, transforms into the virtues of reverence, obedience, loyalty, respect, and their kin. These are all fixed attitudes of mind, or permanent modes of consciousness, directed toward those persons, whosoever they may be, who are recognized as superiors spiritually, intellectually, morally, socially, or physically. Looking around at our equals, the emotion of love as affection transforms into the virtues of honor, courtesy, fairness, friendliness, helpfulness, and the like, fixed attitudes of mind toward all, as previously described. Toward our inferiors, the emotion of love as beneficence transforms into the virtues of protection, kindness, courtesy, readiness to assist, to share, and similar attributes. Once the principle is grasped, the student may deduce its myriad applications. Hate, with its three primary divisions of fear, pride, and scorn, may be treated in a similar manner. Every human being living in society is related inevitably, by the mere fact of his presence, to all around him. This renders him the center of a web of obligations and duties. To accord each related person his due is to be a virtuous man and a source of social unity, whereas to refuse any his due is to be a depraved man and a source of social discord. Hence, to comprehend duty and to execute it is goodness. To comprehend it intuitively and to execute it spontaneously is perfection. While life manifesting itself emotionally is love, perceived intellectually it is truth. Due to a lack of understanding regarding this matter, controversies have arisen as to whether love or truth should constitute the foundation of morality. Yet they are essentially one, just as life is one. Bisma, a master of duty, articulated that virtues are forms of truth, and this is indubitably so. Truth represents the very basis of intellectual character, just as love represents that of moral character. Since love demands the presence of others for its expression while truth does not, it naturally governs the science of our harmonious relations with others, and thus flowers into virtues. God is love, declares the Christian. Brahman is truth, asserts the Hindu. Both articulate the fact, viewed from below, love and truth may appear distinct, yet viewed from above, they are one. The rationale of moral precepts. The great teachers of humanity have formulated certain universal ethical precepts, such as, to do good to another is right, to injure another is wrong. Do unto others as you would that they should do unto you. Do not do unto others that which you would not that they should do unto you. Love one another. What doth the Lord thy God require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God? All moral teachings inspired by this spirit constitute parts of the divine wisdom of Theosophy. They require no justification to the intellect, for they obviously tend to promote happiness. Nevertheless, considerable light is thrown upon the rationale of less obvious precepts by Theosophy. Thus, the concept of returning good for evil appears, prima facie, unreasonable. As Confucius inquired, how then shall one recompense good? Yet the rectitude of this principle is absolute. We have ascertained that alterations in consciousness are accompanied by vibrations of matter, and that such oscillations are sympathetically reproduced by adjacent bodies. Should an individual experience anger, depression, or vindictiveness, his astral vehicle will vibrate in consonance with his temperament. The astral body of any person approaching him will be impinged upon by these emanations and will commence to vibrate in unison with them subsequently. These vibrations induce within the second party a sensation of anger, depression, or vengeance, contingent upon the original impulse. He will thereby intensify the vibrations generated within his own astral form and reflect them with reinforced vigor, fortifying those of the originator. Thus, this fatal interchange persists, escalating in malevolence. Conversely, should the second individual, comprehending the law, seize control of his astral body via the will, preclude it from reproducing the vibrations impacting it, and impose upon it a contrary series of oscillations, those accompanying sentiments of gentleness, cheerfulness, or forgiveness, he will quell the agitation caused by the malign emotion and essentially transmute it into its antithesis. Therefore, the Lord Buddha taught, "Hatred ceaseth not by hatred at any time, hatred ceaseth by love." This veracity is as absolute as the phenomenon wherein a red ray of light extinguishes a green ray, leaving stillness, an absence of luminous vibrations. It is a fundamental law of nature, one that may readily be verified through experimentation. To adhere to this law is to substitute a harmonious relationship for an inharmonious one, in essence, to be moral. Theosophy asserts as a code the universal precepts of the great teachers, analyzing their rationale scientifically, as demonstrated above, and historically through their impact on human evolution and felicity. It perceives their verification in the calamities that ensue from the neglect of these precepts, no less than in the security and comfort that attend their observance, notwithstanding that such observance has historically been merely partial, save for the examples established by the great teachers themselves. Its morality is therefore eclectic. Within the garden of the world, it culls the fairest and most fragrant blossoms planted by the great teachers, and, binding these into one exquisite bouquet, designates it Theosophy as morality. Ideals. To inspire moral conduct among Theosophists, the doctrine directs attention to the great teachers as examples and inculcates the formulation of a moral ideal alongside the practice of meditation thereon. An ideal constitutes a synthesis of true, fixed concepts, intended as an object of attentive and sustained contemplation, thereby influencing conduct. By the laws of thought to be addressed in Section 3, the consequence of such contemplation is the transformation of the thinker into the likeness of his ideal, thus constructing a noble character. Along this trajectory of moral evolution, Theosophists endeavor to guide all aspirants, placing trust not in the law of a carnal commandment, but in the power of an endless life. We fix our gaze upon the world teachers, seeking to live such that some ray of their moral splendor may find embodiment within us, and that we too may, in our humble measure, illuminate the darkness of the world. The form side, ART. In the ancient world, the beautiful was positioned on a plane equal to the good and the true, and the cult of beauty rendered fair the common existence of men. Pythagoras articulated that the arts distinguish the barbarian from the man. Indeed, art and pure literature constitute the instruments of culture, polishing the stone after science and philosophy have hewn the rough product from the quarry into form. Further east than Greece, beauty occupied a comparable station in civilization, as it did likewise in Egypt, and within the great Atlantean civilizations of the Americas. In truth, no civilization the world has ever known, prior to that of the 19th century, has relegated the beautiful to the status of a luxury for the affluent, rather than disseminating it widely across the populace as one of the fundamental necessities for a dignified human existence. In nearly every European nation, the arts and crafts of the peasantry have been well-nigh extinguished. Their traditional attire, suitable and comely, falls into disuse, supplanted by wretched imitations of the grotesque fashions established in Paris and London. The consequence is that the manual laboring class has been entirely vulgarized, having forfeited its innate sense of beauty, to which its crafts, undertaken as pastimes in leisure hours of yore, so eloquently testify, and, in this forfeiture, has become piteously coarse and unrefined. The proliferation of civilized ugliness now threatens the beauty that yet survives in the common life of the further East. This destructive transformation may be encapsulated in a single fact. The discarded kerosene oil tin is usurping the place of the admirably wrought brass or clay vessel for conveying water from the well to the domicile. When the village maiden, who now bears this tin atrocity upon her head, discards her graceful sari with its exquisite vegetable dyes to don the unsightly aniline-dyed skirt and blouse of the West, she will have completed her own vulgarization and solidified the triumph of Western civilization. Beauty as the law of manifestation. From the standpoint of Theosophy, the sense of the beautiful constitutes an inestimable component of the emotional nature. Standing in relation to it as truth, stands to the intellect and goodness to the intuition. It perceives beauty as the law of manifestation, to which all objects must conform. Ugliness is contrary to nature, unnatural and intolerable. Nature creates ceaselessly to conceal it, that she may transform it. She cloaks all that is unsightly with her wealth of beauty. Over a disused slag heap she trails her creepers. A broken wall she festoons with honeysuckle vines. Tossing over it a wreath of pink-faced roses, she plants the wayside ditch with fragrant violets, and draws a sheet of anemones and wild hyacinths over the neglected expanses of the woodlands. With her myriad voices, she proclaims that beauty is the essential condition of divine, and therefore of all perfect, work. Religion has ever served as the foster mother of art. The Egyptian faith bequeathed Philae to the world, Hinduism, the mighty fanes of Madura and Chidambaran, Greece the Parthenon, and many another gem, Islam, the Alhambra, the Pearl Mosque, and the Taj Mahal, and Christianity, the noble Gothic cathedrals, to say nothing of the music, painting, sculpture, and oratory that have glorified the existence of man. Art is inconceivable without religion. The most exquisite architecture has been devised for temples, upon which other edifices have subsequently been modeled. If art has decayed, it is because religion has largely passed out of ordinary life. With the absence of inspiration, art has become imitative rather than creative. The new theosophic impulse will engender a fresh blossoming of art, and already its fragrance is borne upon the breeze blowing from the future. Creation, not imitation. Imitation, however perfect and pleasing, does not constitute the highest art from the theosophical standpoint. Forms are constructed by nature spirits and lesser angels from matter penetrated by the life of the Logos. They build around his thought forms, materializing his ideas. Observing an exquisite flower, we, as human beings, may perceive slightly more of the divine thought therein than the less developed nature spirit could discern and embody. Yet the artist, he perceives far more than we. He beholds the multifaceted concept of which the flower form is but a single facet. He perceives the ideal, and it is this which we beseech him to reveal to us. Raphael painted a woman with a child in her arms. We have observed countless women carrying their infant sons. However, the painter of the San Sisto Madonna beheld the ideal mother and child. Infinite tenderness and protection in the mother, exquisite sweetness, and candid simplicity in the child. He perceived not solely a mother and child, but rather motherhood and childhood themselves, the eternal perfection of the idea, and he portrayed this for the wonder and adoration of every succeeding generation. Consequently, we who are unseeing may now discern the Madonna and babe within every mother and child, and the whole of the world is fairer, because Raphael lived and possessed such vision. Unless Theosophy can provide a renewed inspiration to art, it shall have failed in a portion of its objective, for beauty constitutes one of the most potent instruments for accelerating evolution, and harmony, without which existence cannot be felicitous, finds its natural expression in art. Perfection in form must inevitably accompany perfection in thought. Chapter 3. Philosophy of the Spirit, Karma, and Rebirth. Philosophy constitutes an elucidation of life, formulated by the mind and ratified as valid by the intellect. Absent an interpretation that satisfies reason, an individual remains restless and dissatisfied. The incomprehensibility of existence proves a torment to the contemplative. One cannot find repose amidst a vortex of forces and events, a seething chaos that ejects fragments incapable of being integrated into a rational whole. The mind imperatively demands order, sequence, causal connections, the stately rhythm of purposeful movements, and the relationship of the past to the present and of the present to the future. To understand is the deepest instinct within the mind of man, and it can never rest satisfied until this comprehension is acquired. Man may suffer patiently, struggle perseveringly, and endure heroically if he perceives within himself a purpose and discerns before him a goal. However, if he cannot perceive his path, is ignorant of his destination, is baffled by causes he does not comprehend, and is buffeted by forces that whirl upon him from the darkness to strike him, only to recede into the shadows once more, he is prone to erupt into wild revolt, into savage rebellion, and to expend his strength in aimless blows. Ajax, fighting in the gloom with his frantic appeal to the gods, "If our fate be death, give light, and let us die," stands as a symbol of humanity, struggling in the night of ignorance, and passionately crying out to whatever gods may exist to send him illumination, even should that light signify death. 3 bases for philosophy. Men have endeavored to comprehend the mysteries of existence by approaching them from one of three mutually opposing perspectives. First, that all emerges from matter, the one existence. This, from its own inherent energy, produces all forms and gives birth through them to life. As Professor Tyndall remarked in his celebrated Belfast address, we must perceive in matter the promise and potency of every form of life. Thought is the result of the activity of specific arrangements of matter. The brain produces thought, asserted Karl Vogt, just as the liver produces bile. With the dissolution of the form, the life vanishes, and it is as futile to inquire regarding its location as to ask where the flame resides when the candle is extinguished. The flame was merely the result of combustion, and with the cessation of combustion, the flame necessarily ceases also. All materialistic philosophies are constructed upon this foundation. Second, that all proceeds from spirit, pure mind, the one existence, and matter is merely a creation of the spirit engaged in thought. In reality, there is no matter, it is an illusion, and if the spirit transcends this illusion, he is free, self-sufficing, and omnipotent. He imagines himself separate, and is separate. He imagines objects, and is surrounded by them. He imagines pain, and he suffers. He imagines pleasure, and he enjoys. Let him sink into himself, and the entire universe will fade away like a dream, leaving not a rack behind. All idealistic philosophies are built upon this basis, with varying degrees of thoroughness in their execution. Third, that spirit and matter are two aspects of one existence. The all, emerging from the one simultaneously, united as inseparably during manifestation as the obverse and reverse of the same object, and merging into oneness again at the conclusion of a period of manifestation. In the all exists simultaneously all that has been, all that is, and all that can be, within one eternal present. In this fullness arises a voice which is a word, a logos, God making himself manifest. That word separates out from the all such ideas as he selects for his future universe and arranges them within himself according to his will. He limits himself by his own thought, thus creating the ring pass knot of the universe to be, whether a solar system, a congery of solar systems, a congery of congeries, and so forth. Within this ring reside the ideas, ever begotten eternally of the ceaseless motion, which is the one life, within the stillness which is its opposite and supports all. The motion is the root of spirit, which will, when manifest, constitute time or changes in consciousness. The stillness is the root of matter, the omnipresent ether, immobile, all-sustaining and all-pervading, which will, when manifest, constitute space. All theosophic philosophies are constructed upon this foundation, regarding spirit and matter as two manifested aspects of the one absolute, independent of time and space. The method of articulating these verities will differ significantly among various thinkers. Helena Blavatsky has presented them with great force, albeit with some obscurity of language, in the commencement of the secret doctrine. Bhagavan Das provides a singularly profound and lucid exposition of them in his Science of Peace, wherein he postulates the self, the not-self, or spirit and matter, and the relationship between them as the Great Trinity, the ultimates of thought, collapsing into the one. Triplicity. The Logos reveals himself in his universe or system under three aspects, corresponding to the persons of the Christian Trinity, those of will, wisdom, and creativeness. The human monad is a fragment of his divine parent and reproduces these three aspects within himself, manifesting them in man as spirit. Consequently, the human spiritual will, being part of the one will, constitutes irresistible power when the spirit realizes his unity with the Logos. Consequently, to the human spiritual wisdom, nothing in nature can remain veiled. Consequently, by the human spiritual creativeness, all can be achieved. It is this last aspect in the human trinity that can construct all that wisdom can conceive and that will can determine. As intellect in the subtler worlds and as mind in the lower, it extends into the cosmos to know and to understand. By this faculty, the nature of which is knowledge, man becomes cognizant of all that exists outside himself, the not-self, in the Hindu phrase. We have observed that by the utilization of bodies, man may perceive the outer universe, and consciousness may become cognizant of its environment. Beginning, to borrow Meyer's terminology, with the knowledge of its own earth as the planetary consciousness, it may extend to a knowledge of its universe as the cosmic consciousness. Reason demands this as a necessary truth, not because it is attested to by the giants of spiritual genius, but because there are developments in the planetary consciousness that remain unintelligible, causeless, and futile, unless there exists a cosmic consciousness which they adumbrate and towards which they strive. Religion, art, and unselfish, self-sacrificing love are, as they have been designated, mere byproducts and follies, if we are but gnats of a day, dancing in the sunshine and scattered in the storm. If we construct civilizations with infinite toil and suffering only that they may perish, if all that remains is a blurred record of humanity, shall be a frozen planet whirling in space until shattered, the weary, purposeless labor to be ever renewed and its results ever destroyed. According to Theosophic philosophy, man is an eternal spiritual intelligence whose root resides in God. His countless activities develop his own inherent powers, which none can annihilate unless he himself discards them as of no further utility, and even then they remain within the eternal memory. To such a being, universes are but instructive toys serving his education, and they may crash into splinters without disturbing his serene equanimity, for they are merely means to an end. The universe, viewed as a treadmill, grinding out nothing, renders existence a burden and life a perpetual punishment, leaving us neither an imposer of the burden whose pity we might move, nor a judge to whose clemency we might appeal to mitigate the penalty. Theosophy perceives man as an unfolding power, proceeding from strength to strength, erring only that he may learn, and suffering only that he may grow strong. A radiant, rejoicing, victorious life, whose growth and splendor possess no limit. Philosophically considered, man, like all else, is composed of but two factors, spirit and matter. The various bodies which occult science describes are, from the philosophical viewpoint, his material sheath. In their totality, they constitute merely his body. Man exists as a spiritual intelligence residing within a body. The constituents which coalesce to form this body, physical, emotional, mental, intellectual, intuitional, and spiritual forms of matter, are no more germane to the study than are the solids, liquids, gases, and ethers that compose the physical anatomy of man. Thought power. As thought constitutes the manifestation of creativeness, the third aspect of the human triplicity, Theosophic philosophy employs it to accelerate human evolution. The application of the universal laws of mental evolution to this acceleration of a specific consciousness is designated in the East as yoga. The term signifies union, and is utilized to indicate the conscious unification of the particular with the universal self, encompassing all endeavors leading to that consummation. The methodology of yoga is strictly scientific. The knowledge regarding the laws of mental and intellectual evolution has been acquired through observation and established via experiment. It has been demonstrated, and remains subject to perpetual verification, that thought, concentrating itself attentively upon any concept, integrates that concept into the character of the thinker. Thus, a man may engender within himself any desirable quality through sustained and attentive thinking, or meditation. The haphazard play of thought upon undesirable ideas and qualities constitutes an active peril, creating a propensity towards such adverse elements and leading to actions that embody them. Action operates as a triplicity. Desire conceives it, thought plans it, and the final deed is the embodiment of both. Consequently, that final act is frequently precipitated by favorable circumstances when desire has grown potent and thought has completely sketched the execution. The mental action precedes the physical, and when a man has dallied in thought with the idea of a virtuous or malevolent action, he may find himself performing it in the outer world even before he realizes his own conduct. When the gate of opportunity has swung open, the mental action rushes forth into the physical. Concentrated mental activity may be directed toward the mental, emotional, and physical bodies, reconstructing them to an extent commensurate with the energy, perseverance, and concentration employed. All schools of healing, including Christian Science and mental science, utilize this powerful agency to obtain their results, and their efficacy relies upon the practitioner's knowledge regarding the force he employs and the environment in which he wields it, an environment consisting largely of the bodies of his patient. Countless triumphs attest to the existence of the force that is wielded, and failures do not indicate that the force is non-existent, but rather that the manipulation thereof was not skillful and could not evoke a sufficiency of the force for the task at hand. Thought power, being recognized in Theosophic philosophy as the singular creator, is perceived as operating within evolution, and as having devised for the evolution of human consciousness the admirable method of reincarnation under the law of action and reaction, known in the East as karma. Reincarnation. The purpose underlying man's assumption of bodies, incarnation, has already been elucidated, we have observed that his three higher bodies form his permanent vesture, and that they expand and increase with the unfolding of his consciousness. We have further observed that the three lower bodies are ephemeral, existing through a definitive life cycle spent by him in three worlds: the earth, the intermediate world, and heaven. Upon his return to the earth, he assumes new bodies, and this process constitutes reincarnation. The necessity for this lies in the comparative density of the matter of which the lower worlds are composed. The bodies constructed of this matter can only grow and expand within circumscribed limits, far narrower than those pertaining to the subtler bodies. When stretched beyond these limits by the constant unfolding of consciousness, they lose their elasticity and can no longer be utilized. Moreover, they age through this constant distension and eventually deteriorate. When the consciousness, at the conclusion of a growth cycle, has definitely established itself in its new stage of evolution, it requires new bodies shaped for the expression of its enhanced powers. Were this not ordained within the plan, we would resemble children encased in iron armor, stunted in growth by its non-expansiveness. Just as children outgrow their raiment and we provide them with new garments, we outgrow our bodies and are bestowed new ones by our progenitor, the Logos. The methodology is inherently simple. A seed of divine consciousness is sown in the soil of human life, nourished by that soil, which is experience. Stimulated by the sunshine of joy and expanded by the rain of sorrow, it swells and burgeons into plant, flower, and fruit, until it attains the likeness of the parent tree. Expressed sans metaphor, a human spirit, a germinal life, enters the infant of a primitive savage. He possesses scarcely any intelligence and no moral sense. He exists there for some 40 or 50 years, dominated by desires. He robs, murders, and is finally murdered. He transitions into the intermediate world, encounters many old adversaries, suffers, and perceives dimly that his body was destroyed as a consequence of murdering others. He arrives at a vague conclusion unfavorable to murder. Although this is very faintly impressed upon his consciousness, he enjoys the results of any dawning affection he may have felt, and he returns a trifle more knowledgeable than at his first birth. This cycle repeats continually until he has gradually but definitely arrived at the conclusions that murder, theft, and analogous actions cause unhappiness, whereas love and kindness cause happiness. He has thus acquired a conscience, though it is easily overborne by any potent desire. The interval between births is initially very brief, but it gradually lengthens as his thought power increases, until the regular cycle of the three worlds is established. In the first, he gathers experience. In the second, he suffers for his errors. In the third, he enjoys the outcome of his benevolent thoughts and emotions. Here, also, he transmutes the totality of his virtuous mental and moral experiences into mental and moral faculties. In this heavenly realm, furthermore, he examines his past life, and his sufferings, born of his mistakes, bring him knowledge and, subsequently, power. Every tribulation that I suffered in one body became a power which I wielded in the next. His sojourn in the third world increases in duration and richness of yield as he progresses. Ultimately, he nears the conclusion of his long pilgrimage. He enters the path, passes through the great initiations, and attains human perfection. For such a being, reincarnation has concluded, for he has spiritualized matter for his own use, and while he may wear it, it cannot blind or govern him. Contemplating this perpetually rotating wheel of births and deaths, a man may experience a sense of weariness. However, it must be remembered that each life period is novel to the one living through it. By a sagacious arrangement, a man here on earth forgets his past, at least until he is sufficiently robust to bear its weight, and as Goethe observed rejoicingly, we return bathed and fresh. There is no sense of lassitude in the child joyously springing forth to meet his new life, but rather a sense of glad vitality, of eager enjoyment, and of ever-fresh delights. A soul weary from the journey, entering into a child's body and weighed down by the memory of past struggles, blunders, loves, and hatreds, would constitute a poor exchange for the gladness of healthy childhood. Each incarnation presents a fresh opportunity, and if we have squandered one life, we invariably possess another chance. Reincarnation serves essentially as a gospel, good news, for it terminates despair, encourages effort, cheers with the proclamation of final success, and ensures the permanence of every fragment and seed of good within us, providing sufficient time for the least evolved to flower into perfection. Its value as an explanation of life transcends estimation. The criminal, that basest and most vile, that most impoverished and repugnant specimen of our race, is merely an infant soul inhabiting a savage vessel. He is cast into a civilization for which he remains ill-suited if abandoned to his distinct instincts, yet which will afford him a domain for rapid evolution should his elders assume responsibility and guide him with firmness and gentleness. He presently occupies that stage whereon the average commonplace man stood some million years prior, and he shall evolve in the future precisely as they have evolved in the past. No partiality is exhibited toward those situated differently from him. There exists only a disparity in age. The innate inequality among men need no longer distress us. That disparity between the splendidly formed and the crippled, the healthy and the diseased, the genius and the fool, the saint and the criminal, the hero and the coward. It is true that they are born thus, bringing with them into the world these inequalities which they cannot transcend. However, they are either significantly younger in experience or have constructed themselves as they are under the laws of nature. Every weakness shall vanish in time. Opportunity upon opportunity shall arrive for them, and every height remains open for them to ascend, provided they possess the strength necessary for its scaling. The knowledge of reincarnation guides us, as we shall observe in Section 5, in addressing social problems. It illuminates how social instincts have evolved, why self-sacrifice constitutes the law of evolution for man, and how we may design our own future evolution under natural laws. It instructs us that qualities evolved from earthly experience are returned to earth for the service of man, and demonstrates how every effort yields its full result under unerring law. By granting him sufficient time, it places into man's hands the power to shape his destiny as he wills, and to create himself according to his ideals. It points toward a future of ever-increasing power and wisdom, and rationalizes our hope of immortality. It renders the body the instrument of the spirit rather than its owner, and alleviates the fear that, as the spirit required a physical body to come into existence at birth, it is likely to perish when deprived of that body by death. As Hume remarked, it is the only theory of immortality upon which the philosopher can look. The memory of past lives has its seat in the intellect, not in the mind, in the permanent individual, not in the mortal person. We observed in Section 1 that the lower bodies perished at and after death, and that new ones were constructed with which to enter upon the new life period. These have not passed through the experiences of past lives. How, then, should the memory of such experiences abide in them? The man who would remember his past must become conscious in the causal body, wherein the means of memory reside, and must further learn to transmit the memories garnered therein down into his consciousness working within the brain. Through the practice of yoga this may be achieved, and he may then unroll and read the imperishable scroll of the past. We are accustomed to regarding reincarnation from the viewpoint of the mortal nature of man, thus perceiving a succession of lives which we describe as reincarnations. However, it might occasionally be prudent to consider the question from the viewpoint of the eternal man, the monad manifesting as the triple spirit. Viewed thus, reincarnation disappears, unless we were to assert that a tree reincarnates with each spring when it produces a new crop of leaves, or that a man reincarnates when he dons a new coat. This personality, which looms so significantly down here, is merely a new set of leaves, or a new coat. The man knows himself as one man throughout, possessing an unbroken continuity of consciousness, a single identity, and an uninterrupted memory. The days of his mortal life hold no more weariness for him than the long succession of mortal days holds for our consciousness working through the physical body. We rise in the morning and go forth to interests, ever renewed, and each new day brings its own pleasures and pains, which we experience with zest. The fact that our physical body is perpetually changing does not trouble us in the slightest. We remain the same within it, and so, in the larger life, we remain the same, the ever-living, ever-working spirits. When we realize this, pain and weariness fall away, for we perceive them as belonging to that which is not ourselves. To stand in the fixed center and to observe the whirling wheel from that vantage is most refreshing and beneficial. If any of my readers feel weary, I would invite them to seek this place of peace for a time. The law of action and reaction. Reincarnation proceeds under the law of action and reaction, karma. The word karma signifies action, and we have ascertained above that every action is a triplicity. The Hindu, having studied psychology for thousands of years, analyzes action as being composed of three factors. Will draws the mental energies together and directs them toward accomplishment. The act itself takes form within the mental world. It is then ready for manifestation and is, as it were, pressing outward toward embodiment. It is cast into the physical world when the thinker can create an opportunity by his willpower, or when an opportunity presents itself. It is subsequently precipitated as a visible act. The entire process is regarded by the Hindu as a triple unity, and he designates it karma, action. A clear understanding of this is requisite for comprehending the three subsidiary laws which affect our future destiny. However, it is first necessary to realize that karma is a law of nature, not an arbitrary enactment that may be altered at will, and that it engenders results but does not reward or punish. A law of nature is not a command but a relation, an invariable sequence. It neither rewards nor punishes, but yields invariable, and therefore foreseeable, results. It may be stated generally as follows: where A and B exist in a certain relation to each other, C shall follow. Suppose we object to C, we must keep A and B out of that relation. Nature does not command you must have C. You must endure it if A and B are in a certain relation to each other. However, if you can keep A and B out of that relation by any device, by the interposition of some force or some obstacle, C will not appear. Hence, the better we understand nature, the more we may prevail in the midst of her laws. Every law of nature acts as an enabling force to the man of understanding, though it remains a compelling force to the ignorant. We are perfectly free to balance these forces against one another, to neutralize those which oppose our purpose, while we leave free to act only those which will accomplish it. It was truly said, nature is conquered by obedience. The ignorant man is her slave and her plaything. The man of knowledge is her conqueror and her king. Karma is a law of nature. It compels the ignorant, yet it grants freedom to the wise. The three subsidiary expressions thereof that bear most significantly upon our destiny are: thought builds character, desire attracts its object, and creates the opportunity for grasping it. Action causes a favorable or unfavorable environment, according to whether it has brought happiness or unhappiness to others. We have already observed the first in dealing with thought power. Anyone who chooses to spend 5 minutes regularly every morning in steady contemplation of any virtue he does not possess will discover that virtue, after a duration dependent upon the steadiness and strength of his thought, manifesting itself within his character. A strong and firm wish brings about its own accomplishment. This is frequently observed within the limits of a single life, while a review of several successive lives places the existence of the law beyond doubt. Those who make others happy reap happiness for themselves. Happiness is found by not seeking it, and it ever eludes those who grasp at it most passionately. Most strongly does this principle emerge when reviewing a succession of lives. The individual who has disseminated widespread felicity is born into prosperous circumstances, whereas the man who has engendered unhappiness appears within an unfortunate environment. Yet the law operates with absolute precision. Thought constructs character. Thus, if he has generated happiness from a selfish motive, his inherent selfishness will crystallize into a disposition that is itself wretched, even when encompassed by all that should render existence delightful. As the adage dictates, though the mills of God grind slowly, yet they grind exceedingly small. Though he stands and waits with patience, with exactness grinds he all. Since karma represents the cumulative result, at any specific juncture, of all antecedent thoughts, desires, and actions, manifested within our character, our opportunities, and our environment, it inevitably circumscribes our present condition. If we possess mental dullness, we cannot instantaneously achieve brilliance. If we lack opportunities, we cannot invariably fabricate them. If we are physically infirm, we cannot immediately become robust. However, just as we have created these conditions, so too can we alter them. Our current thoughts, desires, and actions are actively transmuting our future karma day by day. Furthermore, it is prudent to recollect, particularly when confronting an impending calamity, that the karma behind us is as variegated as our contemporary thoughts, desires, and deeds. An examination of any single day will reveal that it comprises both virtuous thoughts and detrimental ones, noble desires alongside the base, and benevolent actions intermingled with the unkind. Each classification exerts its full effect, the virtuous engendering benevolent karma, and the malevolent producing the adverse. Consequently, when we encounter misfortune, we possess behind us a current of force that will assist us in deflecting it, and a concurrent stream that debilitates us. One of these forces may be overwhelmingly potent, whether assisting or impeding us. In such instances, Our immediate exertion will play but a minor role in the outcome. However, quite frequently, the two forces are relatively equidistant in strength, and a vigorous present effort will tip the scales. An understanding of karma should therefore invigorate effort rather than induce paralysis, as is unfortunately the case with those whose comprehension is minimal. It must never be forgotten that karma, being a fundamental law of nature, affords us precisely as much liberty as we are capable of seizing. To speak of interfering with karma is to articulate nonsense, except in the sense that one might speak of interfering with gravity. In that specific context, we may indeed interfere with both to the utmost extent of our capacity. If our musculature is enfeebled by fever, we may be unable to ascend a staircase against gravitation, yet, if we are robust, we may run upward with alacrity, defying gravitation's power to confine us to the vestibule below. It is thus with karma. Once more, nature commands no one to perform a specific act. Rather, she establishes invariable conditions under which objectives can, or cannot, be accomplished. It is incumbent upon us to ascertain the conditions that will facilitate our success. Thereupon, all her forces cooperate with us to realize our desires. As Emerson advised, yoke your wagon to a star, and the force of that luminary will draw your conveyance to the destination you desire. One additional practical matter is of grave importance. We may, in the past, have generated a specific karmic momentum toward evil so potent that we are unable to overcome it by any counterforce we can summon today. Under such circumstances, we are impelled to commit error, even when we aspire to righteousness, feeling ourselves as helpless as a straw driven before the wind. Let this not be a cause for despair. We yet possess resources. When the temptation toward evil arises, we may confront it in one of two manners. Perceiving that we must succumb, we may yield supinely, thereby forging another link in the pernicious chain of malevolent habit. Conversely, the knower of karma declares, I have created this odious weakness by countless capitulations to base desire. I now set against it the superior form of desire, my will, and I refuse to yield. While battling against temptation, the individual is inexorably forced backward, step by step, until he falls over the precipice and yields in action, though not in will. To the eye of the world he has fallen, a helpless victim entrapped in hopeless servitude. To the eye of the knower of karma, however, he has, by his gallant struggle, filed away much of the chain that still binds his limbs. A few more such failures, and the chain will snap, rendering him free. A habit constructed by a multitude of erroneous desires cannot be obliterated by a single exertion of righteous desire, save for those rare instances in which the God within awakens and, with one touch of the fiery spiritual will, incinerates the fetters. Such instances of sudden conversion are on record, yet the majority of mankind treads the more protracted path. The more profoundly we comprehend karma, the more it transforms into a power within our grasp, rather than a force that binds our hands. In this domain, perhaps more than in any other, knowledge is truly power. Chapter 4. Universal Religion and the Path to Holiness. It has been observed that spirit, in the guise of man, possesses three aspects, manifesting himself as will, intuition, and intellect within the three most ethereal bodies. However, the term is also employed in a more restricted signification, denoting the first of these three aspects, that which is manifested in the highest realm of our fivefold system, the spiritual or nirvanic world, where his manifestation is will or power. Frequently, the term is utilized to denote the two superior aspects by extending it to encompass intuition, and no valid objection may be raised against this usage. Indeed, these two aspects constitute the spiritual nature of the human being, just as intellect and mind represent his intelligence, the emotions his feelings, and the body his instrument of action. We have observed that as this division delineates the four great departments of human thought, the scientific, the ethico-artistic, the philosophical, and the religious, it is, therefore, an expedient one. However, for the sake of absolute clarity, I shall employ the term spirit to denote the monad ensheathed in an atom of the highest manifested world, and the term intuition to denote him clothed in an additional atom of the immediate lower realm. The term religion encompasses man's quest for God. God's response is his self-revelation to the seeking spirit that is man. Just as the atmosphere surrounds and interpenetrates us, yet we remain unconscious of its presence notwithstanding that our very existence depends upon it, so too does the universal spirit surround and interpenetrate the individuated spirit, while the latter remains ignorant of him upon whom his life relies. He is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. To know God is, therefore, the essence of religion, as we have observed all religions testify. All else is subordinate, and the individual who thus possesses this knowledge is the mystic, the Gnostic, the Theosophist. Indeed, these titles are borne by many, yet only those who truly know may wear them in their full significance. That God is immanent in everything is the statement of the truth in nature which renders such knowledge possible. God is all, and in all is the Christian formulation of the same verity, and although St. Paul posits it in the future, the mystic perceives it in the present. What does this signify? The immanence of God. It signifies that the essence of religion is this recognition of God everywhere. The true Theosophist perceives in each element a portion of the divine splendor, in the stability of the mountains, in the might of the crashing billows, and in the rush of the whirling winds he perceives his strength. In the star-strewn depths of space, and in the vast stretches of deserts, he perceives his immensity. In the hues of flower-spangled meadows, in the rippling laughter of brooklets, in the verdant depths of forest shades, in the gleaming expanse of snowy mountain peaks, in the undulation of the golden corn in the sunshine, and in the silver wavelets under the moonlight, he perceives his beauty. In the sweet, shy smile of the maiden courted in her dawning, in the eager kiss of the lover who claims her as his bride, in the tender gaze of the wife as it rests upon the husband, in the answering glance of the husband caressing the wife, in the laughing lips of the child joyous in play, in the warm, protecting care of the father and mother, in the steadfast devotion of friend to friend, and in the loyal fidelity of comrade to comrade, he perceives his love. This constitutes the recollectedness of the mystic, and is the true signification of the word erroneously translated as fear, which is the beginning of wisdom. To realize this, and thus to know oneself to be one with God, is the objective of Theosophy, as it is of all true religion. All else is but a means to this end. Theosophical teachings. The universal tenets of religions, that which has been believed everywhere, at all times, and by everyone, constitute the body of doctrines promulgated by Theosophy. These are as follows: the one existence, the one God, manifested in the universe under three aspects: the hierarchies of superhuman beings, devas, angels, and archangels, the incarnation of spirit in matter, of which reincarnation is the human phase, the law of action and reaction, that as a man sows, so shall he reap, the existence of the path to perfection and of divine men, the three worlds, physical, intermediate, and heavenly, and the higher heavens, and the brotherhood of humanity. These are the principal doctrines of universal religion. They can all be demonstrated as true by the broader science which investigates the manifested worlds, excluding none from its inquiry insofar as its instruments can reach. Hence, Theosophy is everywhere the defender and auxiliary of religions, serving each in its own domain, demonstrating to each man the sufficiency of his own faith, and urging him to deepen and spiritualize his beliefs, rather than to assail the forms preferred by others. It is, therefore, a peacemaker among conflicting creeds, a bearer of goodwill, amity, and tolerance wherever it proceeds, recognizing that all religions emanate from one source, the White Brotherhood. It discourages acrimony among religionists and all virulent attacks by one upon another. And hence we say of the Theosophical Society, its vehicle, peace is the watchword, as truth is its aim. The path to perfection and divine men, this is a doctrine which, though existent in all religions, has receded significantly into obscurity in modern times until re-enunciated in Theosophy, and may therefore be appropriately outlined here. It is comprehensively delineated in Hinduism, Buddhism, Roman Catholic Christianity, and Sufism, and its salient features are identical in all. The individual who would enter the path must acknowledge unity as his objective, and this is to be attained by profound devotion to God and indefatigable service to man. The first stage is designated purification in the Christian texts, and the probationary or preparatory path in others. The Christian nomenclature presents the negative aspect, the eradication of weaknesses, while the non-Christian presents the positive aspect, the acquisition of four qualifications. These are discrimination between the real and the unreal, dispassion or desirelessness regarding the unreal, the six jewels, or good conduct, comprising self-control in thought, self-control in action, tolerance, endurance, confidence in the God within, and equanimity or balance, and desire for union or love. The partial yet definite acquisition of these attributes by the candidate conducts him to the entrance of the path of illumination, to employ the Christian terminology, or the path of holiness, simply the path, to employ the non-Christian. Theosophy adheres to the older nomenclature, which divides this path into 4 stages, each entered via an initiation. Initiation is a distinct ceremonial rite, conducted by the perfected members of the White Brotherhood under the sanction of its head. It confers upon the new initiate an expansion of consciousness and admits him to a definite rank within the Brotherhood. He is pledged to service and is what is technically designated safe forever. That is to say, he cannot deviate, even temporarily, from evolution during its period of activity. Each successive initiation entails certain specific obligations which must be fully discharged before the subsequent step may be undertaken. The 5th initiation perfects the man, concluding his human evolution. By that process he becomes a liberated spirit. He has reached the further shore. Some of these beings remain upon our earth to watch over and advance human evolution. Others depart to assume the various offices required for the assistance of our own and other planets, and for the general guidance of the solar system. Those whom we designate masters are among those who remain upon our earth, and they constitute the 5th grade of the White Brotherhood. Other ranks ascend beyond them, until the head of the entire hierarchy is reached. Government of our world. The world is partitioned into regions, each of which possesses a master at its head. He guides its activities, selects specific individuals as his instruments, utilizes them, and sets them discreetly aside when they are no longer of utility, seeking ever to inspire, to guide, to attract, and to restrain, yet never to dominate the human will. The great plan compels execution, yet it is actualized through the utilization of free agents who pursue specific allurements, authority, renown, affluence, and the like. In instances where an individual's ambitions, if realized, would advance the plan, avenues for ascension are presented. Consequently, the individual acquires his desire while unwittingly fulfilling a fragment of the design. While the world functions as a stage and all humanity merely as actors, the drama is composed by the divine playwright. Men may only select their roles, constrained in their selection by the karma generated in their past, which encompasses their inherent capacities. Furthermore, there exist vast departments within the governance of the world, a jurisdiction that comprehends the entire planet, the administrative department which presides over seismic fluctuations, the elevation and submersion of continents, and the evolution of races, sub-races, and nations, counts among its principal functionaries the Manas. A Manu represents the archetypal man, and each root race possesses its designated Manu, who embodies that specific type in its supreme perfection. The teaching department is directed by the Bodhisattva, or Christ, the supreme teacher of gods and men. He establishes religions either directly or through his emissaries, placing each under the aegis of a master, while he himself superintends and sanctifies the whole. When he attains the status of a Buddha, he departs the terrestrial sphere and is succeeded in the office of Bodhisattva by another. These august beings function as the viceregents upon our earth for the Supreme Lord, the Logos, or manifested God. They are his ministers who execute his pleasure. Thus it transpires that his world is guided, protected, and assisted as it gradually ascends along the lengthy path of evolution to his feet. Chapter 5. Applications of Theosophy to Social Governance. It may assist the reader in comprehending the value of Theosophy regarding its relevance to life, were we to consider how it may be applied to the resolution of certain distressing tribulations that confront us within the contemporary state of society. Numerous proposals may be derived from civilizations established and governed in antiquity by members of the White Brotherhood. Nevertheless, given the vastly altered conditions now prevailing, novel applications of these fundamental principles must be formulated. The bedrock of a stable society must be brotherhood. The paramount necessity for every human being is happiness alongside conditions conducive to his evolution, and the obligation of society is to provide an environment that furnishes these elements. The entrance of the human being into an organized society confers upon him a claim, and upon society a duty, analogous to the claim of a child upon its parents, and the reciprocal duty of the parents toward the child. It is this natural and appropriate claim of the younger upon the elder that has been distorted into the aggressive doctrine of rights. Animals, children, the infirm, the ignorant, and the helpless all possess rights, the right to be treated with benevolence, protected, nursed, educated, and shielded. Conversely, the strong and the mature possess only duties. Organized society exists for the felicity and welfare of its constituents, and wheresoever it fails to secure these, it stands ipso facto condemned. Government exists solely for the benefit of the governed. Thus spoke Pythagoras, preaching upon the hill at Tauromenion, and that phrase has reverberated through the centuries, becoming the watchword of those who seek the amelioration of social conditions. Only when the welfare of the governed is sought and secured does the state merit the eloquent description with which the great Greek teacher concluded one of his lectures to the Greek colony of Naxos, whose citizens were assembled around him upon the hill. Listen, my children, to what the state should represent to the virtuous citizen. It is more than father or mother, it is more than husband or wife, it is more than child or friend. The state is the father and mother of all, it is the wife to the husband, and the husband to the wife. The family is good, and good is the joy of the man in his wife and in his son. But greater is the state, which acts as the protector of all, and without which the home would be ravaged and destroyed. Dear to the man is the honor of the woman who bore him. Dear is the honor of the wife whose children cling to his knees. But dearer still should be the honor of the state that preserves the safety of the wife and child. It is from the state that all proceeds which renders your life prosperous, granting you beauty and security. Within the state are cultivated the arts, which distinguish the barbarian from the man. If the brave man dies gladly for the hearthstone, far more gladly should he lay down his life for the state. Pythagoras has become the master Kuthumi, well known in connection with the Theosophical Society, and he articulates the theosophical ideal of the state, the father-mother of its citizens, the protector of all. The duty of the state, or of organized society, is to secure for every one of its members at least the minimum standard of welfare, comprising food, clothing, shelter, education, and leisure, which will enable each individual to fully develop the faculties he brought with him into the world. There exists no necessity for the persistence of starvation and poverty, of overwork and the absence of leisure, or of a lack of comfort and the means of enjoyment. Human intellect is sufficiently ingenious to devise a social system wherein every citizen might possess enough for a felicitous life. The sole obstacles are selfishness and a deficiency of will. It was accomplished long ago under the king initiates who ruled in the city of the Golden Gate and in Peru. It was achieved in the time of King Ramachandra, as may be read in the Ramayana. It was effected when the Manu ruled in the city of the bridge. Yet it must be designed by wisdom rather than by ignorance, and realized through the love and sacrifice of the higher, not through the usurpation of the lower. Mobs may incite revolutions, but they cannot construct a state. Principles of the new order. Basing itself upon a study of the past, Theosophy can establish certain principles to be elaborated into detail by the highly educated and experienced. These principles are that government should reside in the hands of the elders, the wisest, the most experienced, and the morally superior, that the possession of ability and power imposes the duty of service, that freedom yields happiness only to the educated and self-controlled, and that no individual, so long as he remains ignorant and self-controlled, should participate in the governance of others, and should possess only such freedom as is consistent with the welfare of the community, that the life of such an individual should be rendered as happy and useful as possible, maintained under discipline until he is competent to stand alone, so that his evolution may be accelerated, that cooperation and mutual aid should be substituted for competition and mutual struggle, and that the fewer resources a man possesses within himself, the more means of external enjoyment should be placed within his reach by society. Suggestions. The suggestions that follow are the results of my own study regarding what has been enacted in the past and of my own contemplation regarding present conditions. They are merely suggestions, and many theosophists might disagree with them. My sole desire is to indicate a trajectory of change consonant with theosophical ideas. Brotherhood imperatively demands fundamental social changes, and the rapid intensification of unrest, justified by the conditions of the classes that subsist by manual labor, will compel a change ere long. The only question is whether the change shall be brought about by open-eyed wisdom or by blind suffering. At present, society is engaged in attempting the latter method. The land of a country should be utilized to support the ruler, his counselors, officials of every grade, the administration of justice, the maintenance of internal order and national defense, religion, education, amusement, pensions, and the care of the sick, and all those who are not included under the preceding categories. and who earn their livelihood by manual labor in production and distribution. Education, free and universal, should constitute the sole occupation during the period between 7 and 21 years of age, such that youths of both sexes may, upon attaining manhood and womanhood, be prepared to become dutiful and useful citizens, with their faculties well developed, thereby rendering them capable of leading an honorable, self-supporting, and self-respecting life. The working life, and all should labor in one of the 3 aforementioned divisions, should endure from 21 to 50 years of age, unless a briefer term should be ascertained as sufficient for the support of the nation. During the remainder of his life, the citizen should be in receipt of a pension, the result of the accumulated surplus of his working years, and therefore a repayment rather than a gift, and he should be free to devote himself to any pursuit he pleases. Production and distribution should be organized by such individuals as those who amass the vast fortunes now becoming so numerous, and after full provision is made for all concerned in producing and distributing, the surplus profits should be allocated to the first and second categories, chiefly to the latter. The organization of industry should be governed by the concept that labor should be rendered as minimally burdensome as possible through healthy conditions, and the substitution of machinery for human beings in all unpleasant and hazardous work, such as mining, drainage, and the like. Where unpleasant forms of human labor remain necessary for the welfare of the community, the hours of labor should be shortened in proportion to the disagreeableness of the task, without any diminution of pay. If the refuse collector, for instance, is to sustain a dignified human existence, the maximum proportion of his labor capable of mechanical execution should be so delegated. Regarding the remainder, his working duration should be brief and his remuneration substantial, inasmuch as the communal health relies upon his exertions. Furthermore, recreational pursuits, both those of a refining and educational nature and those of pure diversion, ought to be easily accessible to him. He functions as an operative agent of nature, assisting her in the perpetual undertaking of transmuting that which is foul and perilous into the sustenance of nascent life and beauty. He ought to be perceived, as articulated on page 34, not as a menial laborer, but as a collaborator with the divine. Is it asserted that he is uncouth or repellent? If so, the disgrace falls all the more heavily upon us, the cultivated and aesthetically pleasing, who benefit from his toil and have reduced him to his present state through our own egoism, apathy, and negligence. The application of the doctrine of reincarnation to the field of pedagogy compels us to perceive within the child an ego entrusted to our guardianship during the period of physical maturation, requiring assistance in disciplining the body for the specific purpose for which he has returned to the terrestrial plane. Acknowledging that within the ego are enshrined all capacities amassed in antecedent existences, and that the seeds thereof are implanted within the new mental vehicle, we comprehend the full magnitude of Plato's renowned dictum that all knowledge is reminiscence. Consequently, we endeavor to extract from the ego that which he already possesses, that he may invigorate the embryonic mental faculties, and thereby imprint them upon the malleable cerebral structure. We do not consider the corporeal form of the child as the property of ourselves, whether parents or instructors, but rather as the possession of the ego. We deem it our obligation to aid him in acquiring complete mastery over it, laboring from the exterior while he operates from the interior, and adhering to any indication provided regarding the optimal course of study or the most facile path to advancement. We accord the child the utmost liberty compatible with his physical, moral, and intellectual security, and in all matters, we attempt to comprehend and assist, rather than to coerce. The comprehensive application of these tenets may be examined in an admirable volume entitled Education and Service, authored by Alcione. Reincarnation, when applied to the management of criminals and that undeveloped stratum of society which perpetually teeters on the brink of delinquency, proposes a policy wholly distinct from that of our contemporary civilization. The current system affords them absolute license to act as they please, chastises them upon the commission of a legal transgression, and restores them to liberty following a variable duration of incarceration. This results in an existence of alternating freedom and confinement, transmuting them into habitual offenders, and ultimately consigning them to divine mercy, humanity having failed to effect any improvement within them. Viewed through the lens of reincarnation, I posit that the congenital criminal is essentially a savage who has arrived among us, as if entering a school. It is thus our responsibility to treat him as the intellectual and moral infant he truly is, and to restrain the feral nature within him from inflicting injury. Such individuals, as well as the quasi-criminal class immediately superior to them, are distinguishable from birth. They ought to be segregated in small, specialized institutions, provided with such elementary instruction as they are capable of assimilating, treated with both benevolence and firmness, engaged in ample recreation, and instructed in the rudiments of manual labor. The instructors in these establishments should be volunteers drawn from the upper social strata, willing to educate and participate in diversions with the youths, and capable of inspiring within them sentiments of admiration, attachment, and fidelity, which in turn would elicit obedience. For this to be achieved, they must be placed in the company of those who are manifestly their superiors. From these schools they should be transferred into small colonies, radiant, agreeable villages equipped with emporiums, recreational grounds, music halls, and dining establishments, governed by men of the aforementioned caliber. They should possess every amenity to render existence agreeable, save for the liberty to render it mischievous or wretched. These colonies would furnish cohorts of laborers for all the more arduous varieties of work, mining, road construction, porterage, sanitation, and the like, thereby releasing the respectable citizens currently employed in these capacities for more elevated pursuits. Certain individuals, namely the congenital criminal and the raw savage, would remain under this benevolent constraint for the duration of their lives, yet they would depart from this existence far less savage than they were upon their entry into it. Others would respond favorably to this regimen, acquiring sufficient diligence and self-discipline to be ultimately restored to liberty. The primary impediments would be innate rowdiness and indolence, for the criminal is inherently an idler, incapable of consistent industry. The institution would effect some improvement in him. Virtuous conduct would be rendered agreeable, whereas rowdiness and sloth would be made disagreeable. The maxim, "He that will not work, neither shall he eat," is sound, for sustenance is produced by labor, and he who, possessing the capacity, refuses to produce it, holds no claim to it. Tokens might be issued for every hour of labor, exchangeable at the shops and restaurants for the necessities of life. The individual could work as much or as little as he desired, with the equivalent in essentials and luxuries remaining a matter of his own election. It is only feasible here to delineate the broad contours of the solution to this problem. Similar methods would be employed, mutatis mutandis, with females of the corresponding classification. Karma, when applied to the analysis of slums, would identify them as magnets for the lowest orders of incarnating spirits. It would be our wisdom, as it is our duty, to eradicate these foul locales, which are attractive only to the most undesirable elements of the incoming multitude. In the light of Theosophy, it is the obligation of the elders to design and gradually construct towns of respectable habitations with adequate interstitial spaces, to which the inhabitants of the slums should be transplanted. These centers of contagion must be demolished, and the soil, sodden with the filth of generations, converted into gardens. The putrescence will then be transmuted into trees and flowers, whereas to erect new edifices upon such ground is to invite disease. Moreover, beauty must be sought, for, as stated in Section 2, it is a vital necessity for all, not a luxury for the privileged few. Beauty refines and cultivates. It reproduces itself in the forms and manners of those who dwell under its influence. Beauty in attire, in the domicile, and in the municipality is a pressing necessity as an evolutionary force. It is not without significance that prior to the present era of mechanization, when the populace was more encompassed by natural beauty than they are currently, the garments of individuals of every class were aesthetic, as they remain in the East. It is innate for humanity to seek self-expression through beauty. It is only as man becomes estranged from nature that he accepts with indifference ugliness in his attire and environment. Contrast the apparel observed in our slums with that witnessed in an Indian village. Volumes might be composed regarding this theme of the application of Theosophy to existence, yet within our present constraints, the foregoing must suffice. Chapter 6. The Cosmological Structure of Systems and Races. In Section 3, the fundamental principle governing the relationship between spirit and matter was elucidated. It may prove illuminating to contemplate certain of its minutiae. One may discern that the universal ether within our solar system, and presumably elsewhere, given the multiplicity of such systems, contains innumerable bubbles, precisely analogous in appearance to bubbles emerging within water, empty spaces circumscribed solely by the surrounding fluid. A soap bubble floating in the atmosphere constitutes a minute quantity of air encased within a film of soapy water. Conversely, bubbles within water represent tiny portions of air amidst a mass of liquid, possessing no limiting film, maintained as bubbles solely by the pressure of the encompassing water. Thus, these bubbles are sustained as such by the pressure of the surrounding ether, and as they cannot escape this medium, they are compelled to remain bubbles. They are holes in the ether, as Helena Blavatsky designated them long ago, vacuities in space. Furthermore, she stated that they were excavated by Fohat, the power of the supreme logos. Ancient texts similarly cite the great breath as their origin. The analogy is patent, inasmuch as bubbles may be produced by exhalation into water. A French scientist, cited by Mr. Leadbeater, asserts, "There is no matter. There exists nothing but holes in the ether. Yet out of aggregations of these voids, all that we designate as matter is constructed." The construction of atoms by the first life wave. The logos of a solar system encloses a colossal fragment of the universal ether, thus replete with bubbles, within his aforementioned ring-pass knot. These bubbles are perceptible to the vision of the third spiritual sphere, wherein one may observe that he initiates a tremendous vortex of force, which sweeps the bubbles together into a massive aggregation. The third aspect of the logos is the creative, and through this medium he emits the first life wave, as it is termed, which constructs the bubbles into atoms, subsequently aggregates atoms into molecules, and finally organizes these into the 6 familiar sets of combinations, which in the physical world are designated as subatomic, superetheric, etheric, gaseous, liquid, and solid. These original discrete bubbles constitute the matter of the divine sphere, whereas the matter of the monadic sphere consists of groupings of bubbles into atoms. These are formed by an impulse of the life wave of creative thought, generating minute vortices, each of which draws in 49 bubbles. Thus, 2 interpenetrating worlds are established, the divine and the monadic, the former comprised of free bubbles, the latter of certain of these combined into atoms, each atom consisting of 49 bubbles. The second impulse from the life wave segregates a quantity of these atoms, composed of 49 bubbles, dissociates them, and recombines them in vortices, each of which contains 49 squared bubbles, forming the atoms of the spiritual world. A third impulse separates a mass of these from the remainder, dissociates them, and recombines them in vortices, each of which contains 49 cubed bubbles, the atoms of the intuitional world. A fourth impulse, in similar fashion, yields atoms of the mental world, containing bubbles to the 49th power of 4. A fifth yields atoms of the astral world, containing bubbles to the 49th power of 5. And a sixth constructs the atoms of the physical world, each composed of bubbles to the 49th power of 6. Thus are formed the interpenetrating spheres of 7 types of matter, each type serving as the atomic basis of a world composed entirely of combinations of its own particular atom. When this series of atoms was brought to completion, the 7th impulse was emitted. This action constructed aggregations of atoms, a vast number of diverse combinations, which subsequently entered into further combinations with one another throughout the process of many ages, a period of inconceivable duration. During this interval, the glowing nebula gradually cooled, ultimately fragmenting into a central sun, with various planets revolving around him as a center. This constitutes the colossal labor of the creative aspect of the solar logos, the Spirit of God who moved upon the face of the waters of ether, the axis of the whirling mountain which churned the ocean, so that living entities might emerge therefrom. The relationship between atoms and consciousness. There exists one point of significant interest regarding the formation of atoms that ought not to be omitted. The life of the logos constitutes the whirling force within the atom, which binds its component parts together. This life imparts to the atom its distinctive quality, its essential nature, which is a particular mode of the divine consciousness. The Hindu designates this the tattva. Literally, the thatness, tat, or that, is a reverent expression for the divine being, and thatness indicates godness or god nature. Thus, each atom possesses its godness. The measure of the atom's vibration, imposed upon it by the will of the logos, is the tanmatra, the measure of that. This corresponds to the axis of the atom, lines of the thought force of the logos, the angular divergence of which, within the fixed limits of vibration, determines its surface form. Each type of atom possesses its own peculiar function, for the states of consciousness manifested by the logos within his universe, regarding what he is outside it, none save his peers can articulate, are identical in quality, though not in quantity, with the states of consciousness in man, the faint image of his glory. It is thus his consciousness within the atom which corresponds to our consciousness, stage by stage, with the material of the atom faithfully reflecting each stage in the wavelengths of its vibrations. Thus, the atom of the spiritual world vibrates in response to the modes of spirit, spirit being its life. That of the intuitional world vibrates to the modes of intuition. For a similar reason, that of the mental world to the modes of the intellect, that of the emotional world to the modes of emotion and passion, and that of the physical world to the modes of vitality, all for analogous reasons. Each alteration in consciousness within any of these states is immediately met by a change of vibration in the corresponding matter. Conversely, any vibration initiated in matter is instantly answered by a change in the corresponding state of consciousness. For instance, all matter of the emotional or astral sphere is composed of atoms wherein the life is emotion, and the measure of vibration of which is correlated to emotion, to express and respond to it. The entire vast gamut of emotions, passions, and desires is enacted by consciousness upon this matter. Pure passion and desire upon this matter exclusively, however, as emotion constitutes a mingling of passion and thought. A certain admixture of thought matter enters into the expression of emotion. The matter of the mental sphere is constructed of atoms similarly connected with thought. The life is mentality, and the measure of vibration is correlated to thought, serving to express and respond to it. Just as definitely as the range of sounds in the physical world resides within certain vibration numbers, and the range of colors within others, so too can thoughts and passions only be expressed by matter which vibrates within specific limits. Chains. When this phase of the work has proceeded sufficiently to render planets possible within the solar system, a series of 6 globes, composed of the matter of spheres of varying densities, is formed in connection with each planet, amounting to 7 globes, inclusive of the planet itself. Such a series is designated a chain, and during its period of evolution, it traverses 7 stages or lives. There is thus a succession of 7 chains, and this complete series is termed a scheme of evolution, being under the charge of a potent spiritual intelligence, referred to by Theosophists as a ruler of 7 chains. There exist 10% of these within our solar system, yet only 7 are in manifestation, governed by the 7 spirits before the throne of God, as mentioned in the Revelation of St. John. They are situated at diverse stages of evolution, distinguished by the sphere of matter in which their lowest globes exist. Thus, the Neptunian and the Terrene chains each possess 3 globes within the physical sphere, for these are both at their profoundest point of descent into matter, in their middle, or 4th, life. The 7 globes constituting the Earth chain comprise Mars the Earth, and Mercury similarly. The Neptunian chain encompasses Neptune and his 2 satellites. Those scholars inclined to pursue this facet of theosophical inquiry must investigate it within more comprehensive volumes, as the subject is inherently complex. The construction of forms by the second life wave. Let us direct our contemplation toward our own chain. Evolution circumnavigates a chain 7 times, and each of these revolutions is designated, most fittingly, a round. This evolutionary impetus is termed the second life wave, and it constitutes the life emanated by the Logos through his second aspect of wisdom, that dual aspect of knowledge-love. Broadly speaking, this life wave precipitates through the spheres of matter, inducing progressively greater differentiation, and subsequently ascends, effecting a reintegration into unity. Its primary function is to endow matter with specific attributes, rendering it suitable as the substance for bodies. It infuses itself into the 3 subtler grades of matter, constituting the higher mental sphere. Matter thus permeated by the second life wave is designated, when in an atomic state, monadic essence, for it has been rendered capable of supplying permanent atoms to monads. Conversely, when non-atomic or molecular matter is utilized, it is termed elemental essence. This nomenclature is derived from the treatises of medieval occultists, who applied it to the substance composing the forms of nature spirits. Indeed, they classified these entities as elementals, categorizing them according to the elements of air, fire, water, and earth. The 3 superior strata of the mental sphere, when viewed as mental elemental essence, constitute the first elemental kingdom. All abstract thought forms are constructed from this substance, and a vast, resplendent host of angels, the bodiless devas, possess forms composed of this very matter. The four inferior levels of the mental sphere, permeated by the second life wave, establish the second elemental kingdom. From this are fashioned the bodies of the lesser angels, the form devas. As the life wave enters the astral realm, atomic matter transforms into astral monadic essence, while molecular matter becomes astral elemental essence, or the third elemental kingdom. The bodies of the lowest order of angels, the Pashandavas, and a multitude of nature spirits are composed of this substance. The life wave proceeds into the physical world to execute its customary function. The bodies of the lower nature spirits, fairies, gnomes, and similar entities, are formed of the etheric matter thus imbued. The mineral kingdom represents the nadir of density. Here the latter half of the life wave's operation commences, the construction of bodies for plants, animals, and men. Now upon the ascending arc, the astral and mental vehicles are likewise fashioned from the elemental essence. Consequently, a conflict frequently emerges between the life of the man and the life inherent in the matter of his vehicles. The latter presses downward, seeking ever grosser embodiment and more acute differentiation, whereas the former aspires upward in pursuit of unity. St. Paul, addressing this internal strife, naturally exclaims, "I find another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members." The man must compel the flesh into subjection, for its life proceeds evolutionarily downward upon the descending arc, while his proceeds upward upon the ascending arc, journeying toward the realization of spirit. The advent of the monad via the third life wave. The juncture at which man definitively individualizes occurs when the monad and his ray, spirit, intuition, and intellect, having brooded over the evolving forms born within the bosom of the second life wave, flash downward to meet the evolving embodied life. At this moment, the causal body is formed from the matter of the first elemental kingdom upon the higher levels of the mental sphere. The human monads are likewise born upon a divine current, the third life wave, issuing forth from the Logos through his first aspect. We observe, therefore, that the Logos emits three mighty waves of his life through his three aspects in succession. The first shapes and ensouls matter. The second imparts qualities and constructs forms, and the third conveys the human monad downward to unite with the forms prepared by the second. Root races and subraces. We must now focus our attention exclusively upon our own world. Thrice has evolution swept around the series of globes of which our Earth is the densest. 3 rounds lie behind us. The fourth circuit has reached our Earth, which is presently evolving under its influence. Although minerals, plants, animals, and men all evolve concurrently, we shall confine our inquiry to humanity. 7 root types of men evolve upon our Earth during this stage of its existence. Theosophists designate these types as root races, and each possesses its own distinct continent or geographical configuration. The first 2 root races have vanished. Of the third, the Lemurian, which flourished upon the continent of Lemuria, now largely submerged beneath the Pacific Ocean, scarcely a pure specimen remains. The Negroes are its descendants, born of mixed lineages. The fourth, the Atlantean, disseminated across the globe from the continent of Atlantis, which bridged Western Europe and Africa with Eastern America. It constructed some of the mightiest civilizations the world has known, and the majority of the Earth's inhabitants still belong to this lineage. The fifth, the Aryan, leads humanity at present. The sixth lies within the womb of the future, yet its continent is commencing its formation, and will occupy, roughly, the site of Lemuria. The islands, currently emerging in the northern Pacific, are indications of the commencement of a labor that will require hundreds of thousands of years for its accomplishment. The seventh lies in the remote future. Each root race divides into 7 subraces. Thus, we find the fourth root race divided into the Romahal, the Tlavatli, Toltec-Turanian, Semitic Akkadian, and Mongolian subraces. The fifth root race has, thus far, produced 5 subraces: the Hindu, Arabian, Iranian, Celtic, and Teutonic. The 6th subrace is beginning to manifest itself within the United States. Each root race possesses, as the shaper of its archetype and the guardian of its evolution, a great being designated a Manu. The appellation is derived from man, to think, the etymological root of man, hom, man, and the like. The Manu is the man, the archetypal man of a root race. The great racial types may be comprehended by placing side by side a Negro, a Mongol, and an Aryan. The distinctions between subraces are exemplified by a German and an Italian. It will be observed that immense fields of study are here unveiled, profoundly interesting, though they may not bear immediately upon human happiness or conduct. Chapter 7. Objectives and Tolerance of the Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society was established in the year 1875 by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, a Russian, and Henry Steele Olcott, an American. The former contributed her immense occult erudition and total self-abnegation, having descended from an affluent lineage of the Russian nobility, while the latter provided extraordinary organizational acumen, a capacity previously demonstrated through his service to his nation regarding the purification of its military department during the Civil War. Initially, upon their reassertion of the ancient wisdom within the modern era, they encountered a tempest of derision and scorn. Currently, these concepts have permeated every civilized nation, and one may assert without apprehension of contradiction that the movement is today influencing the entire sphere of intellectual thought. The foundation of the society is somewhat distinct. Only a single tenet is binding upon any member, the acceptance of universal brotherhood. Its objectives are threefold. First, to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Second, to encourage the study of comparative religion, philosophy, and science. Third, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent within mankind. It becomes evident that no member is requested to either believe or propagate theosophical teachings. Every member remains absolutely free to pursue study precisely as he elects. He may accept or reject any theosophical doctrine. He abides within his own faith, whether Hindu, Parsi, Buddhist, Hebrew, Christian, or Mohammedan, and his religion, should he adhere to it fervently, will color all his conceptualizations. Should he accept theosophical teachings, a devout believer in any specific religious form will present them through his own paradigm, and he is absolutely at liberty to do so. However, he must not insist that his specific interpretation be accepted by others. The experiment of constituting a profoundly religious body equally accessible to members of all faiths is unique. Nevertheless, it is gradually succeeding, notwithstanding manifold difficulties, occasional friction between members adhering strictly to opposing views, and abundant discourse regarding details. The principal policy of perfect tolerance and the rationale for such policy have been formulated as follows by myself, and have met with objection from no member. It may therefore be presented as an articulation of the general perspective. No individual is interrogated regarding his religious opinions upon his accession, nor is interference with them permitted. Rather, everyone is required to accord the religion of his fellow members the same respect that he claims for his own. The society possesses no dogmas and, consequently, no heretics. It does not exclude any man on the grounds that he fails to believe the theosophical teachings. An individual may repudiate every one of them, save for that of human brotherhood, and yet claim his place and his right within its ranks. Theosophists realize that precisely because the intellect can perform its finest work only in its own atmosphere of freedom, truth can best be discerned when no conditions are imposed regarding the right of investigation or the methods of research. To them, truth is an entity of such supremacy that they harbor no desire to bind any man with stipulations as to how, where, or why he shall seek it. The future of the society depends upon the fact that it must encompass a vast variety of opinions on all questions where differences of view exist. It is undesirable that there should reside within it only a single school of thought, and it is the obligation of every member to guard this liberty for himself and for others. The Theosophical Society is the servant of the divine wisdom, and its motto is, "There is no religion higher than truth." It searches within every error for the heart of truth whereby it survives, and whereby it attaches human minds to itself. Every religion, every philosophy, every science, and every activity draws whatever portion of truth and beauty it possesses from the divine wisdom, yet it cannot claim such as exclusively its own, nor set it against others. Theosophy does not belong to the Theosophical Society. Rather, the Theosophical Society belongs to Theosophy. The Theosophical Society is composed of students, belonging to any religion in the world, or to none, who are united by their approbation of the aforementioned objects, by their aspiration to remove religious antagonisms, and to bring together men of goodwill, whatsoever their religious opinions, and by their desire to study religious truths, and to share the results of their inquiries with others. Their bond of union is not the profession of a common belief, but a common search and aspiration for truth. They maintain that truth should be sought through study, reflection, purity of life, and devotion to high ideals. They regard truth as a prize to be striven for, not as a dogma to be imposed by authority. They consider that belief should be the result of individual study or intuition, rather than its antecedent, and should rest upon knowledge, not upon assertion. They extend tolerance to all, even to the intolerant, not as a privilege they bestow but as a duty they perform, and they seek to dispel ignorance, not to punish it. They perceive every religion as a partial expression of the divine wisdom, and prefer its study to its condemnation, and its practice to its proselytism. Peace is their watchword, as truth is their aim. Theosophy is that body of truths which forms the basis of all religions, and which cannot be claimed as the exclusive possession of any one faith. Members of the Theosophical Society study these truths, and Theosophists endeavor to live them. Whosoever is willing to study, to be tolerant, to aim high, and to work perseveringly is welcomed as a member, and it rests with the individual to become a true Theosophist. I may append that the majority of us regard the Theosophical Society as the result of a spiritual impulse sent forth by the White Brotherhood, in order to save the world from sinking into materialism, and to prepare the minds of men for the restoration of the esoteric teachings of religion. It is to us the latest of many such impulses, the earlier ones having been embodied in separate religions, while this movement seeks to draw the existing religions into united, friendly cooperation. We regard Helena Blavatsky as a messenger of the White Brotherhood, and many of us, I myself among that number, feel toward her the deepest gratitude, for she opened to us, in this life, the gateway through which we have passed into the presence of those who sent her.